Hello, you join us live on stage 7 with a shot of the back of the bunch, cutting up to the front where Team Sky are keeping an eye on things, and things need keeping an eye on because there is a large group of 29 riders out front, and in there is the yellow jersey of Greg Van Avermaet. They currently have a lead of 5 minutes 49 seconds with 84 kilometres left to ride. There is Van Avermaet, so Van Avermaet has more than doubled his lead from this morning. There are all sorts of riders in there. Vincenzo Nibali is in there, Fabian Cancellara's in there, and the teams of the big 2 or 3 also have men in there. Kirienka's in there for Sky, Izagirre for Movistar, and it's an interesting and fluid race situation as the race heads into the mountains. So before we go any further, let's take a look at today's route map. There it is, stage 7 takes the race into the Pyrenees via one Pyrenee in particular, the Col d'Aspan, and it comes very late in the race, although not quite late enough to provide the Tour's first altitude finish. So today's race will be shaped first by the 12 kilometres of climbing to the top of the Aspan, then the 7 kilometres of descent to the finish at Lac Payol. And here is sort of what that will look like from a rider's point of view, although once they get over the top, the riders will be going much faster than this. As I said, Greg Van Avermaet starts out today with a lead of 5 minutes and 11 seconds over Julian Alaphilippe, with Alejandro Valverde and Joaquin Rodriguez 2 and 3 seconds further back. Chris Froome leads the group of favourites at 5:17. Including Nairo Quintana, Fabio Aru, Dan Martin, TJ Van Garderen, Adam Yates and Romain Bardet. Thibaut Pinot and Geraint Thomas have lost a little time over the first 6 stages. Alberto Contador is at 6:38 and Vincenzo Nibali, who's in today's break of course, is at 14:06. So, Chris, a very fluid situation. We see Sky taking close attention up at the front, even though they've got a man, Vasil Kirienka, in the break. What are we looking at, apart from Greg Van Avermaet trying to get himself as much of a head start as possible before the race hits the Col d'Aspen?
Well, it's a curious situation. They've been forced to take this break seriously. Van Avermaet, clearly not a climber, but he is a good rider, and you give him 10 minutes plus, then you've got to keep him monitored. So they've kind of been forced to take control earlier than perhaps they would have liked to. But they're not riding too hard at the moment. We can see that the breakaway is just riding steady. A lot of experienced riders in there. They know this is about trying to win the stage, so they don't want to panic the bunch into chasing absolutely full on. And I think we're going to see potentially 2 races here. It's all going to come down to the last climb, of course, which is the first big one of the race, and most importantly that 7 kilometre descent or get to the finish line, 6 of descending and 1 that's a bit grippy up to the line.
See the face of Tony Martin there, Fabian Cancellara's in there, great men for a breakaway, but are there any of them in there? Steve Cummings too. Is there anybody there that could possibly hold off the field all the way up to the top of the Col d'Aspan and have a chance of descending down to Lac Payol with the lead?
Yeah, I mean, you've got several in there. Nibali's obviously got something to do in this tour, hence he's even tried to get into a breakaway. He would desperately like to salvage something. He's got the legs. I mean, there's several riders in there. It's going to depend on the next hour of racing and how much leeway they give in, how big a group that is. So we've got some climbers, but there's some also rounds that may attack on the flat. Cancellara, for example, he knows he can't outclimb some of the others, so he'll attack earlier. So we're going to watch how it unfolds for the next hour.
All right, 82.2 kilometres to go. Still a long way to ride until the chief point of interest of the day, the Col d'Aspan. But this race is interesting already on the flat. Let's get over to commentary with David Miller and Ned Boulting.
Yeah, thanks very much, Gary. We have been waiting a while, haven't we, for this Tour de France to explode into life. I think it just has. The first really big showing of the GC.
The thing is what we had today, Ned, is what I kind of thought. It's like you said, it's the race has started today, and we have what's been pretty amazing first hour. We've had an hour of just frantic racing, and we had at one point we had a group of 12 of Peter Sagan and Mark Cavendish who were off the front, and they actually then pulled out of that break and then moved on, and then it kept on going to the point where they had full 49.4k average for that first hour.
Well, apologies, David, I've got my microphone sorted now. In all our excitement, we forgot the basics, which is make yourself heard.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary race situation, and I've just, as we get to grips with who is in this breakaway, big move going up the road, 5 minutes and 40 seconds they got with 81.6 kilometres still to go, and it's packed with talent. We'll come on to that in a minute, but I've just scribbled down on a bit of paper a question I frankly don't know the answer to, and that is this. When was the last time the yellow jersey on the Tour de France was in a breakaway? Now, it must have happened. I'm sure it's happened repeatedly, but I can't remember it. It's a very, very unusual race situation and a brilliant result for Greg Van Avermaet on the day.
Yeah, he timed it perfectly. I mean, we saw the race was going so fast, and at times like that, it was quite flat start. It's so difficult to get in that move, and he read it to perfection. He went across, he let everyone else fight it out for nearly an hour, and then when he did go, there was already a group of about 8 or 10 riders there, and he went across, bridged across himself with 2 other riders, and then even more came across, but he just did it at the perfect time, because ultimately everyone was fried behind, and that's why this group ended up being so big, because it started off with 9 riders, and then it was groups of 2 or 3 were coming across to it, to the point where it ended up being 29, but it took a lot of time for those little groups of 2 and 3 and 1s to get across. Steve Cummings we saw go across, and he was one of the most impressive, the way he bridged up there. Everyone else was struggling, and he just popped across on his own.
So of the 29 riders up the road, obviously the yellow jersey is at 0 seconds in the general classification. Everybody else in the move is in double figures at least. There are 1 or 2 riders, though, who are of interest. Vincenzo Nibali, all right, he's lost a lot of time on this Tour de France so far. He's 14 minutes and 6 seconds down, but you can't assume anything with that man, and they will have to keep an eye on how far they allow the breakaway to go. Jan Bakelants as well, the rider nowadays for AG2R La Mondiale, who you just caught a glimpse of towards the front of that breakaway group in that distinctive kit. He's at 11 minutes and 3 seconds down, and so too is his teammate in the same ballpark, Alexis Villamoz, a former stage winner on the Tour de France at the Mur de Bretagne last year. He's only 10 minutes and 43 seconds down. So although those are notionally big gaps, they will want to keep an eye on those riders, but Greg Van Avermaet has pulled a blinder today. The composition of that breakaway is extraordinary. I count 1 former Tour de France winner in Vincenzo Nibali, 9 stage winners up the road, and 7 former or current wearers of the yellow jersey. There are 3 former time trial and 1 reigning time trial world champions up the road as well. So it is packed with talent as far as you look. And that's why Team Sky are on the front and keeping a weather eye on things. Sharing the work now with Movistar. Fabian Cancellara, one of those former world time trial champions. And, well, he's enjoying this move. And they are all enjoying getting up the road and seeing what comes of today, because it's wildly unpredictable. Don't imagine for a second that this group of 29 will stay away and in one piece all the way to the finish line. It'll break up, it might well reform, it'll come together, it'll splinter, there'll be attacks. It will not be particularly stable. It's far too big a group with far too many diverse interests for that to be the case all the way to the finish line.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a good size in that 29 riders means we almost have a little peloton up there, so it's going to, the tactics will be interesting. It's not simply going to be a case of survival and what we often see with these race-long breakaways, where it simply comes down to fitness and who can go the furthest and last the longest. I think it's going to be, we've got a little race going on up there. Now what we've got here behind with Sky and Movistar, there's only 2 riders chasing. That's Luke Rowe, and I think that's a VT from Movistar, and at the moment they're just stabilising it. It's taken them a while to get to the point, and that's only happened in the last 5 kilometres where they've got it under control and they're just holding it around the 5:30 mark. But it would be interesting if Movistar, how much they want to get from this, whether they're going to really, because there's a group of 29 riders means that they're going to get to the bottom of the final climb, the Col d'Aspin, in reasonably good shape. They're not going to be too exhausted. They can share that workload around, and it means they're going to be able to attack that climb. So the peloton can't count on the usual situation where, well, the brake's been off the front all day, they're going to be tired, we'll just be able to bring back time so easily on that final climb. It's not going to be the case, especially when you've got riders like Vincenzo Nibali in there. So if they want to play the stage, Movistar or Sky, they're going to have to get that down to under 2 minutes, under 1.5 minutes when they hit the bottom of the Col d'Aspin.
That will take some racing to do, though, given the power up the road.
Yeah, and it's only 60 kilometres now till they hit the bottom of it, so that's not long. I mean, that would require a committed chase and doing the classic cycling standard of bringing back 1 minute every 10 kilometres, because it is mainly flat now to the bottom, a bit false flat uphill, one little climb, but it's not very demanding to the bottom of the Aspen, so the whole race is going to happen there. But we've seen a very hard first hour, and there's not really been any respite. I mean, the only respite for the peloton was during those few kilometres where the time gap went up to 5 minutes, 5 minutes 30, and since then the pace has been back on, trying to stabilise it, get it under control. And it's an absolute dream scenario for BMC. They don't have to do any work. There's no Richie Porte. This is the advantage when you have the yellow jersey for Richie Porte and TJ Van Garderen. They're sitting at the front. They don't have to do anything. They can just mark riders. All the responsibilities on Team Sky and Movistar.
Well, that's the situation, as we understand it. 5:46. So if the Tour de France were to stop now, Greg Van Avermaet would win it by 11 minutes. That's effectively the lead that he's got.
Yes, we were discussing yesterday whether he'd be able to hold on to the peloton, hold on to that jersey today, and he's just gone and reversed the whole race around, in that now everyone's chasing him again, and he's got himself in a position where it would be very surprising if he did lose the jersey today, because now he's this group here, and the closest rider to him is still 5 minutes behind, Vuillermoz. He's 10 minutes behind. Yeah. Sorry, yeah. 10 minutes behind. So, you know, he's almost just guaranteed the keeping of his yellow jersey today if the peloton stays where it is.
Vincenzo Nibali has one Astana teammate, that's Alexei Lutsenko. Astana have placed 2 riders, one of whom happens to have won the Tour de France a couple of years ago, Vincenzo Nibali, in the break. 2 teams, though, David, have 3 riders up the road, and that's a terrific result for some of the minor teams, if you like, and probably pains you to say that your former team is in that category, but realistically, Cannondale Drapac are not here at the Tour de France with any great hopes of winning it or even getting a rider on the podium. So today, and stages like today, is what they're all about.
Yeah, for sure, and it's... with the team classification, that's quite a good move to have 3 riders in there. But to be perfectly frank, I don't think either of those teams are going to be battling for team classification come the 3rd week. So it would be more intelligent for them just to base their whole stage today on racing for the stage win. But it's going to be a tough one, because there are some very good climbers in here, and it will eventually come down to a climbers race in those final 20 kilometres.
So Matti Breschel, the Danish rider for Cannondale Drapac. Alex Howes, who's in his 2nd breakaway of this edition of the Tour de France, he is up the road for them, and so too Sebastian Langenfeld.
Now, what if this is one of the machines where they're checking the heat readout for checking for motors on the bikes? I've never actually seen one before, but it looks like it might be something like that.
Yeah, it's a new bit of kit. Every year on the Tour de France there are innovations, and this is one of them. The UCI doing regular checks with some bit of clever kit that's looking for heat coming from generated by electric motors, part of their campaign to stamp out motor doping in the sport. Eviti moves to the front for Movistar, the sole Movistar rider on that early part of the duty, and you can see the rest of Nairo Quintana's team are just the 3rd team on the road in the main field, sitting in behind the yellow jerseys team of BMC and Team Sky, who are asserting themselves. Even though they don't have the yellow jersey, they are showing that they are the #1 team at the front of that peloton, containing all the big favourites, of course.
This move is working really well so far, which is quite surprising. Normally a group this big, you'd already have arguments going on, and it's splintering apart even at this stage. But I think everybody knows that they've scored a bit of a blinder in this one. It's going to put, everybody's going to benefit from this. And although I think there's very few riders in here who are isolated, but everyone's almost got a teammate. There's only a couple of guys in here who are alone, and there's I Am Cycling, Olivier Naesen, Paul Voss, Vicioso, Steve Cummings. Yeah. Steve Cummings is probably playing his. They'll have to kind of get together a bit and make sure they're not marked out, because if they do attack and one of the other guys who's got teammates in there comes, they can easily play the card of, I'm not working with you, my teammate's behind. So they're going to have to work together, those individuals.
It's a brilliant day's racing that we can look forward to now. It's not all about the Col d'Aspin either. There's one Cap 4 climb to come. They start climbing that at 53.2 kilometres. That's a little way up the road, and an intermediate sprint too, with 25.5 kilometres remaining. We're going to take a short break. Welcome back. 5.5 minutes seems to be all that Team Sky at the front of the peloton are going to grant this massive group, packed with talent, that has gone up the road, containing the yellow jersey of Greg Van Avermaet. And it's stabilised. Locked down now, that advantage And the pace is still very, very high. You can tell they're all strung out single file. It has not been a relaxing day today. 162.5 kilometres over the Col d'Aspin in the final, and then dropping down to a new finish for the Tour de France at Lac de Péole. But they've been racing all day. It took over 50 kilometres for that big breakaway group to establish itself. So the first hour plus, hour 20 minutes was full on today. And it's not exactly easy either now, because they can't just sit up. This is not a forlorn breakaway with no prospect of making it to the finish line. This is not a little two-man, three-man move that we've been familiar with over the early stages of this Tour de France, which the peloton could easily control. For a start, the topography won't allow that. There are some serious climbs still to come, or one at least, the first Cat 1 climb. But the size of the group and the composition of the group is something that they cannot allow to have too much slack. That said, 5.5 minutes, that's a big advantage. And Greg Van Avermaet is by a long distance the best placed rider in the general classification in that move. He's on 0 seconds. The next best man, Alexis Villamoz, is 10 minutes and 43 seconds down. And effectively now on the road, he's bought himself another 5.5 minutes to double his advantage over the group of favourites. So good Tour de France, just got a whole lot better for Greg Van Avermaet and for BMC. 70.1 kilometres still to go. They're skirting the Pyrenees on the flat roads as well at the moment, and heading in a westerly direction before eventually they'll turn left, and bit by bit the road will rise in front of them. Over the Category 4 Côte de Cap Verne, that comes with 45.5 kilometres remaining. Then there's a sprint on ever rising roads before they hit the foot of the Col d'Aspin with 19 kilometres to go. 12 kilometres of climbing at an average gradient of 6.5%. And all day, people have been heading up that mountain from the surrounding hillsides and the lowlands, and holiday makers, fans coming over from the Basque country, both French and Spanish side of that particular divide. French fans got a very international feel to the crowd assembled for the big showdown on the Col d'Aspin and anticipating a hell of a bike race. And given the way it's exploded today, that's exactly what they're going to get. That's an exciting prospect, isn't it? It has been a extraordinarily benign Tour de France in terms of casualties and racing incident, if you like. We've had some great races, but not the carnage that we've been accustomed to over the last few years. But today, that might all change.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we can see the peloton. We discussed this, I think, a couple of days ago. Everyone will end up in Paris equally exhausted. It's just it started off a bit easier this year than sometimes it does, which probably actually was going to work out, make it a better race, because it means they're coming into the mountains fresher than they normally would. It's been the course has been reasonably flat in straight lines. It hasn't been affected by much, and I think that's been beneficial, and we could see that today. Now that they're going into the mountains, there's almost a certain chance that the breakaway could make it to the finish. Everybody was motivated to get in that breakaway, and hence the fact they averaged 49.4 kilometers an hour the first hour, and we were seeing such the quality of the riders trying to get in the break. This is what the French would almost call an échappée royale. We've got the total of 27 Tour de France stages amongst these riders in this front group, which is still too short of Mark Cavendish. But we've got Vincenzo Nibali, who's got 5, Tony Martin, who's won 5 stages, Fabian Cancellara, who's won 8, and then there's Greg Van Avermaet 2, there's Steve Cummings, Simon Gesch, Alexander Vuillermoz and Jan Bakelands all won 1 each. So the pedigree of this move is just phenomenal, and we're going to see that. I think it's going to make some amazing racing when we get closer to Aspen.
Ian Stannard heading the Team Sky train with Imanol Erviti on his wheel for Movistar. They've got their whole team on the front. Luke Rowe is the next Team Sky rider, just being handed a bottle by Mikel Nieve, who's got about 4 more stuffed down his racing jersey, and just getting a helping hand from Rowe as Nieve moves up to the front, and he'll be looking after Ian Stannard now. Next bottle out of the jersey and handed over. That's the teamwork, and that's what you have to do. Mikel Landa was on domestique duty for a couple of days after he dropped out of contention a little bit. Careful, Vincenzo.
Yeah, I'm just thinking exactly the same
Careful,
thing.
Vincenzo. You've been there before. Of course, Vincenzo Nibali famously ejected from the Vuelta a España for grabbing onto his team car, and rather than just doing what he's doing now, which is effectively okay, getting bottles and having a little bit of a chat. On that particular occasion, he was propelled off the front of the group and towed right up to the next group on the road. So it was an offensive rather than a defensive move on that particular day. But it's not allowed. He would have been very aware of the camera inches away from him. So is this plan B of Plan Nibali for this Tour de France? We saw him almost deliberately losing time in the Massif Central, the first mountain stage. It looked like a calculated move, and this looks like the reason for that move.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's in a position now that Nibali wouldn't have been allowed to get away if he hadn't lost time. So the fact that he lost those 10 minutes, or near 10 minutes, to the main GC contenders has given him a certain liberty. He can now get into moves that he wouldn't have been allowed to otherwise. And it's good to see he's actually making the most out of that rather than just sitting there. And this might be part of his big plan to not only get ready for the Olympics, but now try and get some personal success here before he has to work for Aru. If that happens, we're yet to see if that's... We're still, which is a bit weird, we're still yet to see whether he will work for Fabio Aru or not, because we know there's no love lost between them.
Yeah, it's not as if Fabio Aru hasn't got a lot of climbing talent in that Astana team. It's incredibly strong. The likes of Diego Rosa, Jakob Fuglsang, of course, they're almost team leaders in their own right, those two.
Exactly. I mean, I think we've got three with Team Sky, Movistar, Astana and BMC. There's four teams there with incredible quality in the mountains. So it's going to make for interesting racing because it gives them a position to explode the race, much like we saw Movistar do a couple of days ago when they just went in the front for 20, 25 kilometers, 30 kilometers, and they exploded the whole race, which very few teams can do that. Now, it didn't actually work that day. And look, we can see the times coming down now. So it was up to 5:45, and we can see this is no longer a chase just to stabilize. This is a chase to try and bring that move back. So that's interesting to see.
So don't make any assumptions about today's racing. If you thought that 29-man group was big enough, strong enough and bad enough to get all the way to the finish line on their own, maybe that's not the case. Maybe there is genuine ambition here amongst the big players of the general classification to bring it all back and have a proper full-on scrap on the Col d'Aspin, looking similar, tying up both ambitions, a stage win and a move in the general classification. Couldn't rule it out.
Well, it's quite interesting as well, because this could have been quite a benign stage, as you referred to the first week, Ned, in the fact that it's quite rare to see the first main stage in the Tour de France just have one climb and then not even summit finish. So it was going to be an interesting thing to see how they raced it. And actually this has worked out quite well for the GC guys, because what might have been, well, I mean, I use this word a bit hesitantly, an easy stage, it's now turned into a very hard stage because it's been so high speed, which changes the whole makeup of the race, because now that there's the possibility that they could do a lot of damage on the Aspen, when if it had been a fairly sort of routine ride into it, that wouldn't have been the case. So now there's an opportunity, a GC opportunity that wouldn't have been there before.
You're looking at Paul Voss, his second day in a breakaway, on the move on stage one, got himself the King of the Mountains jersey. Sylvain Chavanel, who's been on domestique duty for Brian Coquard up to this point, now riding for himself to see what he can do. Chavanel, formerly, of course, of IM Cycling, amongst others, and Europcar, going back to where it all started for him, in the company of Monsieur Bernardo, the team manager, the general manager of Direct Energie, who I think I'm right in saying turned 60 yesterday. Did you see that?
I didn't see that, no.
Is that about right?
That would be about right. Yeah, he was racing
I think it was his birthday.
80s.
Yeah, yesterday. And I'm being told he got a cake presented to him this morning at the start. Paolo Tilolongo is another birthday boy today, the rider for Astana. He smashed himself up on the Vuelta in horrible fashion, those facial injuries that he got, but it's good to see him back on the Grand Tour.
39 years old, so one of the older guard, and one of Astana's trusted domestiques, the mountain domestiques. We've seen him do some fantastic rides. And before that, he was with Contador, so he has a pedigree of being relied upon by big GC leaders as a climbing lieutenant, if you like. What's interesting with this move, actually, just been noticing, in theory, Greg Van Avermaet wouldn't be asked upon to ride whatsoever, being in a yellow jersey. He could equally just sit on the back and say, but he's been, since every single moment that he's been in there, he's been turning through and working. So, I mean, he's probably doing that just to make sure to keep the harmony, because he's in a split role now, not only defending his yellow jersey, but saving his team. If he can keep that move away, it saves his team controlling or riding, or even riding if the attacking starts going on behind, they can sit on the riders that are trying to bridge up.
Skabu Grumai, just stepping on his pedals to try and maintain contact with Jürgen Rollens. He's one of 2 riders from Lamprey, the other being Christian Dorosek. Bit by bit, we'll get familiar with them. You can see the 2 AG2R riders as well. Alexis Villermoz towards the front, and Jan Bakelants is the other rider there. As Darrell Impey, another former Maillot Jaune of the Tour de France, gives way to a former stage winner, Simon Geschke. Talent everywhere you look. 63.4 kilometres, and their advantage is coming down. Just 4:48 now. Welcome back. Business as usual for Team Sky at the front of the peloton, asserting themselves and controlling the race. Luke Rowe setting a determined pace at the front of the peloton and pegging the breakaway back bit by bit. It's not coming down in big chunks, but it is moving in their favour of the peloton, and it has been. The peloton, can't call them the yellow jersey group, for heaven's sake. He's up the road, and it's heading in their favour. It has been for the last 15 or 20 minutes. In about 6k's time, they start to climb the Côtes de Cap Verne, a Category 4 climb. It's quite long, 7.7 kilometres, but it's only just over 3%. Thomas Voeckler at the back of the peloton today, and the yellow jersey at the front. And still we don't know the answer to the question about when was the last time the yellow jersey was in a breakaway on the Tour de France. General bafflement around here. I think you might have to go down to the days of Panache in the 1980s and the 1970s, the days of Eno and Merckx, etc., for that kind of situation and the race to have developed. And Greg Van Avermaet is living up at the moment to his illustrious countryman, Eddy Merckx. We got another illustrious name in the commentary box here to join us, Matt Rendell. Matt, you've been number crunching a little bit on those 29 riders up the road, and it's a powerful bunch, isn't it?
Oh, well, the horsepower is astonishing, isn't it? 18 World Championship time trial medals in that group, if you think about it. Cancellara, the 4 championships at elite level, 2 bronze medals at elite level. He was a silver medalist at under 23 level and twice the world junior individual time trial champion. Tony Martin, 5 medals at elite level, 3 of them gold. Kirienka, 2 medals, a gold and a bronze. And Vincenzo Nibali actually has always been a great time trialist. There he is. And he was an under 23 and a junior bronze medalist in the discipline, and that's without going into the national championships held by riders in that group, notably Sylvain Chavanel, the record holder of the French individual time trial championships, 6 of them to his name. And then there's Steve Cummings and the rest of them who are great time trialists. And Matti Breschel, of course, 2 medals on the road, a silver in 2008 and a bronze in 2010, the World Road Racing Championships. And then this man, Olympic gold medalist in the individual time trial and a silver medalist on the road in 2008. Tony Martin, of course, a silver medalist in the individual time trial in London 2012 behind Bradley Wiggins. So what a load of horsepower in that group. Incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, it's remarkable. Thanks for that, Matt. A barrage of information there in terms of the medals represented in this group. 57.4 kilometres they have remaining, so only about 4k to the foot of this Cat 4 climb. Vasil Kirienka, the reigning world time trial champion, the only rider from Team Sky up the road. And Vasil Kirienka, you won't see him at the front of this group of 29 at the moment because his team are working hard to pull it all back.
Yeah, his only job will be to mark stuff, just got to stay as far ahead as he can, because they've got great climbers behind Team Sky, obviously, with Mikel Landa, Nieve, Wout Powles, Geraint Thomas, but their job will be to pace up the climb. We're not sure yet whether Team Sky are going to ride an aggressive Aspen and try and set Chris Froome to already put time into his rivals if he can, or they'll be riding a defensive, just controlled rhythm like we saw before a couple of days ago. But what for me is they've got the perfect situation with Kirienka, because his objective now will be to try and get to the top of that mountain before Chris Froome gets to him. That way Chris Froome's got another teammate for the descent if he does find himself isolated, and then Kirienka can take him down. So although it is a 7Ks from the top to the finish, and five of those Ks are descent, and the actual last 2Ks they are flat and even going a little bit of false flats. So it's not easy, those last 2Ks, and it would be beneficial for Chris Froome to have Kirienka there if he can make it, because otherwise if he wasn't in this break there's no way he'd be able to be there with Chris Froome. So for Team Sky it's a good play.
Antoine Duchesne is the man from Direct Energie, the Canadian. Big man, just setting the pace at the front of the group of 29. And meanwhile, it's Emmanuel Erwitte who takes over from Ian Stannard at the front of the peloton, the only Movistar rider detailed with this early part of the chase. Movistar are a really interesting team to watch, though. I was talking just before we came on air and before the race got underway with Jens Vogt, who is working for American television, broadcasting this Tour de France for the second year, retired same year you did.
Yep.
David Miller, and he was saying that he expects and almost demands of Nairo Quintana that he attacks in the Pyrenees, and he tries to put time into Chris Froome. His calculation being that Quintana can almost bank on the fact that he has to give, especially on the first time trial, he has to give Chris Froome a minute at least there, and that is time that he does need to take into those time trials. So don't hang around, get the job done. And he would be expecting Quintana to try and do that. Why not today? It's an opportunity.
No, for sure. I mean, I think if you're feeling good, you've got to make the most out of that when you can. So they're all still eyeing each other up. And Aspern's going to be the first time they can really get a good impression of who's good. They got a good idea a couple of days ago when Greg Van Avermaet won, when we saw Movistar take the race under control and ride aggressively, and we ended up with 23 riders who are essentially the 23 clear GC riders for the next 2 weeks. But again, that group's now got to get whittled down again in the next mountain stages, because as usual there'll only be 2 or 3 big players on GC, which is normally what happens. But we're yet to see clearly who they are.
Well, that's right. Nairo Quintana and Chris Froome, the big rivals in this Tour de France, as Mikel Landa just goes through the shot, followed by Sergio Henao, the Colombian, and Mikel Nieve, stage winner on the Giro d'Italia after Mikel Landa went home. Wout Poels, all the climbing talent, and there is their main man, Chris Froome, at the back of that black and blue train. Yeah, Nairo Quintana and Chris Froome are, in most people's eyes, the two big favourites for this Tour de France. And one of the reasons why they're very hard to separate is they've kind of skirted each other for most of this season. They haven't competed that often against each other, and they don't know too much about each other's relative form. And that's the mystery. That's what we don't know, and they don't know. But today on the Col d'Aspin might be the first indication, at least for now. It's an incredibly long race, and we're still in the first week of a 3-week race, of how their legs are.
It's quite an interesting situation for them as well, because if they do, they can play the GC race, and often a team will hold back from really firing its big guns, trying to avoid the yellow jersey, which is weird as it sounds, but sometimes for a big GC leader, they'd rather not have the added stress this early in the race, because it makes for a lot of pressure, be it within the race, but also around it, the constant. You're the last person to the hotel in the evening, you've got media requirements, you've got further expectations, and also your team is then loaded with the responsibility of controlling the race. So sometimes a team will hold back from unleashing its absolute potential until a few days into the mountains. But what they can do today, if they like, is ride very aggressively, and in the knowledge that normally Greg Van Avermaet and BMC are still going to have the yellow jersey now, thanks to Greg Van Avermaet being in that break and having 4 minutes 56 now, and he's also already got 5 minutes further from the other day on all those GC contenders. So at the moment he's 10 minutes ahead on the road, 10 minutes up the road on GC. So that's going to make an interesting final in the race, because it'd be good to see Movistar and Team Sky really go head to head, and not wait for the bigger days coming up.
It's been very unusual preparation for Chris Froome relative to his other Tour de France victories in 2013 and 2015 this year. They have gone head to head in stage races, Nairo Quintana and Chris Froome, most notably in the Tour of Catalunya in the spring, and then much later on the Tour de Romandie. And it's hard to read in quite what those races meant, certainly from Chris Froome's perspective. Both of them were won by Nairo Quintana, and Chris Froome was uncharacteristically fragile on certain occasions in both races, finishing 8th overall in Catalunya and 38th in the Tour de Romandie. However, he was clearly not riding them to win them, and was approaching them in a very different way from how he's approached stage racing in the past in the early season. So what do you read into that form relative to Quintana?
Well, I think Chris Froome has made it clear. He stated that he prepared for Tour de France different this year. He's come onto the boil a lot later, in perfect timing, to be honest, at Critérium de Dauphiné, and a month before the Tour de France. But up to there, he didn't. In the past, I think it was very much a requirement simply for his own mental well-being, to show that he was one of the strongest and get the support from his team, etc., by winning the races early on. But now he's got the confidence. He's won 2 Tour de France's. He's come in, he's realised that his weakness in the Tour de France, even the ones he's won, has been that final week where he's been tired. So he's delayed his preparation this year in order to make sure he comes into the Tour de France coming up to in the ascending spiral, if you like, rather than plateauing and descending as the race goes on. So I think it's very difficult to compare Nairo Quintana and Chris Froome from the results this year so far.
Yeah, it's almost impossible, isn't it? And it's worth remembering that despite the fact that Chris Froome was brilliant at the Dauphiné and he stamped his authority on that race in the face of serious opposition, Nairo Quintana was not one of them. He was not on that race. So the imponderables and the mysteries continue, and they'll continue, well, for another 30 kilometres at least. They'll continue probably for another 2.5 weeks. But they start the Col d'Aspin with 19 kilometres to go on this race. The breakaway are climbing, though. They have just started to climb the Cap Fort Côte de Cap Verne. There are 2 players in the King of the Mountains competition in the breakaway, although that's not the first thing on their mind at all. One of them is Jasper Stuyven, who wore the jersey earlier on in the week. He's got 5 points in the King of the Mountains competition. And there's 1 point available at the top of this Cap Fort climb. And the other player in the polka dot jersey, interestingly, is Greg Van Avermaet, the man in the yellow jersey.
And you see, we just saw there before, they've gone through the feed, and Chris Froome, he won't take his own feed back to just lessen the risk of an incident happening. So I think it was Ian Stannard we saw there handing across to, and not just Chris Froome, it looked like one of the leaders was getting a bag handed to them as well. So they're obviously playing it very safe.
Well, the gap's coming down. It's not coming down massively quickly, it has to be said. It's hard work bringing this group back. Antoine Duchesne just drops off for some medical attention from the doctor on the back of a motorbike, and all is calm at the moment. 52.3 kilometres, the breakaway are climbing, and the peloton will be in just about 4 minutes from now. Welcome back. Under 50 kilometres of racing now, 4 minutes and 18 seconds, so it's come down a little bit, and step by step, kilometre after kilometre, their advantage is being whittled down, but they're still out there and they still have a fighting chance of surviving. The 29 men who finally attacked and got away after a fast and furious start to today's racing. It took them over 50 kilometres to establish a breakaway. They've never had an advantage of more than about 5.5 minutes. That is all that Team Sky, mostly Team Sky at least, were prepared to give Vincenzo Nibali, Greg Van Avermaet, Fabian Cancellara, Tony Martin, Jan Bakelants, Sylvain Chavanel, Daryl Impey, etc, etc, etc. Huge move, by far the biggest breakaway so far of the race, and they're the riders who've got themselves up the road, including Alexei Lutsenko from Astana, Simon Geschke, stage winner of course last year on the Tour de France. What do you think, David? Is it in the balance, 4:21, 4:22, or have they got them just where they want them now?
Well, it's definitely more in control. I think Movistar learned their lesson from stage 5, where they started their chase way too late.
Sorry, I'm just rather distracted by the sight of the side of the road. What's going on there? I don't quite see how the pedalling fits into any of it, but oh, he's playing the drums.
It's a fine line between madness and genius.
Talking of which, we caught our first glimpse of Didi the Devil this morning, didn't we, on the Col d'Aspin? He's here.
So yeah, no, you can see the time gaps coming down. So that's what's interesting. It's gone from 5 minutes 40 to 4:15. So this is a concerted chase now, and in my opinion, they need to get it down under 2 minutes by the bottom of the Aspin in order to stand a chance. When you've got a rider like Nibali in there, they probably even get it. They need to get it below 1 minute, because if he, although we saw him get dropped off the other day, you never know with Nibali whether that was a tactic. He obviously wasn't at his best, so he pulled off, so that's for sure. But even not at his best, he's going to be able to climb on a day like this on one climb as fast as some of the fastest climbers in the world. So if they want to go for this stage, which I'm getting the impression that they do, Movistar and Team Sky, then they're going to have to get that down with under a minute by the bottom of Aspin, I think. To this man, Nibali, they'll know that's the guy that they can't let have much time.
One thing that fascinates me, David, just watching on and not, being a racer in the middle of the peloton, is how, on a complex day like this, how do the tactical decisions get made? And some riders entirely oblivious to the sort of niceties and the complications of a day's racing, and just simply do what they're told, and are others much more alert to it and read the race much better. And ultimately, what role does the director sportif play, and are some better than others, and how do these decisions get made? I mean, the calculation you just made, for example, about 1 minute, that's pretty much all you can allow Vincenzo Nibali at the foot of the Col d'Aspin. Now, that's a judgment call, and presumably everyone forms their own judgment on that. But how does that information get disseminated around the peloton?
Well, that'll be, I mean, for example, how this move got away. We saw a lot of these riders here would have started today going, no, I'm not interested in the break unless it really turns into a race. Lots of these riders in this move, these 29 riders, they weren't in any of the attacks the first 45 minutes. And then as soon as they saw it was starting to get real, and you start to see some big riders start to go because the peloton starting to get tired, it starts off this wave of other big riders going, realizing, okay, this is going to turn into a proper race, and if those guys are going, that means we'll have some really strong, we'll have a strong group up there that stands a chance of getting to the finish. Now, that will have all happened very organically. That won't have been a decision that was discussed really in team meetings. That will have been done on instinct and racing instinct. And then once they're up there, it takes about 5 or 10 minutes for the director sportifs to find out the composition of the group and then start making decisions. And by that point, the break's got its 5 minutes. And then they'll start to discuss each other. Movistar will speak to its leader. The team captain will speak to the director sportif and say, so what are we going to do? And he'll say, let's go for it. And then you put a rider on, and then they'll go, well, we know Nibali's up there. We can't let this get too far. So let's start bringing this down. We've got to start bringing this down now. And that's kind of how it works. But it takes a while for those things to unfold. And normally that's when the time gap happening is when all the decisions are being made.
Yeah.
And then as soon as conclusion is done, that's when they start to stabilize it, and then they start to make a judgment on how quickly they bring it back.
Yeah, it's not just about how strong are you, how are the legs, it's about reading the race as well. And as you say, a big group going, and attacks just coming left and right on the peloton, and riders just clipping off the front all the time. You have to be aware of who those riders are, because there's danger in every single one of those attacks.
No, and that's what I mean. When you see Tony Martin, Cancellara, Nibali, those riders going, you're like, okay, this is a good move. And so that's very much what happened. I mean, when you look at the list of riders in that move, they'll have seen each other going and going, okay, this is going to work, I'm going to go. And then once they're up there like this, there might come a point, if they see this coming down too quickly, then they're going to have to break that group up again. So it's 29 riders now, but if it gets down to 4 minutes, 3 minutes, it might come that they're going, let's attack and let's split it up and let's go get this into a smaller group where we can be more committed. Because there'll be a lot of games being played at the moment. Guys will slip beyond the 10th position and kind of try and hide, if you like, and get out the rotation and sort of get some free turns. And after a while, that stops. So you can see here the harmony's kind of going. It's kind of starting to lose momentum, in which case they're going to have to make it smaller and make it kind of everybody then who's in the group, the next group of could be 4 riders, 8 riders, 3 riders. Very much what Greg Van Avermaet did on stage 5. There was a group of 12 riders, or 9 riders, I think it was, and he saw it wasn't working very well, so he broke it up again to get the committed riders with him, so they could really work well together. And that's going to have to happen here, because watch now, this is just getting too slow. They're going to lose too much time, and if they want to stand a chance of winning the stage, then they're going to have to go again.
Yeah, the fluid dynamics look a bit more ragged in this group. Steve Cummings is towards the back. 5 riders behind him, including Alexis Villamoz, a winner on the Mur de Bretagne last year on the Tour de France, and the 2 Lampre Merido riders, Srabu Grumai and the Slovenian Christian Dudacek. Fabian Cancellara has reacted as if on cue to David Miller's suggestion that it's getting a little bit too slow, so all the big guns are right on the front now. Fabian Cancellara, Tony Martin, Daryl Impey and Greg Van Avermaet, all of whom in the past have either worn the yellow jersey or are wearing it today. Greg Van Avermaet, the latest of the riders on the Tour de France in 2016 to pull on the yellow jersey for the first time, following on from Mark Cavendish and Peter Sagan. Talking of whom, those 2 riders were in the first breakaway that didn't succeed of the day. 12 riders got up the road, and Cavendish and Sagan were among them. We were licking our lips at that prospect, but it didn't go.
Well, that was very interesting, because it shows that Mark Cavendish isn't going to let that green jersey go easily. He knew that Peter Sagan would try that tactics. It's one of his usual tactics in the mountains and in these kind of breakaway stages. He'll try and get up the road in the move and score the sprint points. And Mark Cavendish was obviously just marking him. So that's quite encouraging, because we going to have a proper battle on our hands there.
Just a little glimpse of Vasil Kirienka sitting in about 5th place in that line on his radio, relaying back to the team car behind him, team car 1 if you like, where I should imagine either Nicolas Portal or Rod Ellingworth is behind the wheel, what was happening at the front of the peloton, and the fact that those big riders had gone to the front and were setting a much higher pace, because it is his team, after all, Kirienka's team, who are doing the work to bring this all back. There he is now. He's dropped a little bit further back behind the rider from Cofidis.
And you can see Fabian Cancellara really lifted
there's
pace.
Nibali. Well, Nibali has gone to the front now, and he'll move on. That's a sort of an attack from Nibali, and he'll take the mountain point, I should say, over the Cat 4 climb.
Interesting. Maybe that's his new objective.
Vincenzo Nibali, King of the Mountains on the Tour de France. Well, he's held the jersey in 2014, I think for 4 days, but his bigger objective on that occasion was the yellow jersey. What is Vincenzo Nibali up to here?
So doing the kind of just be cool. I think Kiki is also saying maybe if someone would have come with him. Fabian Cancellara lifted the pace on that climb there. You could see that it's strung out when we were talking before, and it all spread across the road. He had a little word with Stevens, and there's Tony Martin shaking there, just basically, what is he doing? It's, I imagine that's what you kind of don't expect a rider of Vincenzo Nibali's stature to sprint off to get 1 mountain point.
It's a little bit demeaning, but it might be part of a grand master plan that will unfold Nibali style.
Of course, it might be in Paris. He's won by 1 point, in which case that was the smartest thing he's ever done.
Exactly. Exactly. Can't rule it out or in with Vincenzo Nibali at the moment. Van Avermaet, the yellow jersey, leading the Tour de France. A rare sight indeed. Feast your eyes on it. Very unusual, but full of what we like to refer to as panache.
That was I mean, he made it look easy getting into that group. We'd seen him go battling, and then he just popped across into it at the perfect time.
There's a change of guard with Movistar on the front now. They've got 2 riders represented at the front. Winner Anacona being one of them. One of the best named riders in the peloton, Winner Anacona, the Colombian rider. His name Winner, which is unusual to say the least, is actually a mistake. His father was a huge cycling fan, and his 2 favourite riders were Andy Hampsten and Peter Winnen. Going back a few years, and he managed to misspell, or someone along the line misspelt Winner Anacona's name on the birth certificate, and Winnen became Winner. I think his middle name is Andy as well, or Andrew.
Brilliant.
Well, Nibali's gone back to the fold to think about what he's doing, and to allow other people to scratch their heads as well and wonder what's going on. Angel Vicioso from Katusha on his wheel.
Well, I think it's official to say that Movistar wants to race the stage today, because this is a real chase now. This isn't just a controlling pace. This is an absolute pursuit now. They're bringing back time quite quickly, and you can see the commitment on Winner Anacona's face there.
Well, they have done this already on the Tour de France. On the stage in the Massif Central, they did a lot of work to bring back a huge advantage, but then they ran out of troops, and that was it. And now Vincenzo Nibali goes again. Antoine Duchesne reacts, and so too does the yellow jersey. So it's a big race at the front. They feel some of the pressure from behind is beginning to spell the end for this breakaway group, and they're attacking each other now, which is either a good thing or a bad thing.
This is what had to happen, because you can see the time gaps coming down now, and they have to split it up and make it smaller and get 4 or 5 or 6 riders that can really work well together, because at the moment no one's really going hard maximum pace. They're all just watching each other and sort of playing games. So now it's the time for them to break it up and get a race, reboot the race, if you like. Because behind them, when you look at the organisation here and what's going on, they have to react to the front as well to this. They'll see the time gap coming down. It's tumbling now, so they need to react very quickly.
But Movistar can't go too deep into the red here with this chase. They can't burn out all their troops and expose them to a counter-attack then from Team Sky. That would be massively counterproductive at this point.
No, they're doing it much better. They learnt their lesson from stage 5, where they went on the front and did that destructive chase, which, yes, did destroy the peloton and brought back a chunk of time, but also destroyed the team. This time they're doing a much more gradual, progressive pursuit. They've had one rider of VT, now they put another one on there with Anaconda. They've still got Sky working with them, so they're doing it right at the moment.
Antoine Duchesne is full of attacking And both the teams with 3 riders are exploiting their advantage in numbers. Both Cofidis and Cannondale Drapac have 3 riders in the breakaway. Matti Breschel, the Danish rider from Cannondale, has forced a split, and there's a little gap opening up between, I think it might be Borut Bozic. So I think that's Breschel, Duchesne and Bozic, is it, from Cofidis? Hiding behind the big frame of Antoine Duchesne.
No, I think it's Navarro. It's one of their climbers, Navarro.
Danny Navarro.
So I mean, that's for Navarro.
Yeah, it is indeed.
For Navarro, that's a good move because Breschel and Duchesne, they're not such good. Bozic, they're not such good climbers. So this is a perfect move for him.
Yeah, Danny Navarro is a climber, the leader of Cofidis, who are slightly having to improvise their Tour de France without their big name marquee sprinter, Nacer Bouhanni. Have they gone, those 3? Certainly there's no reaction for now from the yellow jersey or from Steve Cummings. So 3 riders have got up the road, and Van Avermaet is taking the opportunity of this slight lull in the action to power himself up for the battle still to come. He's won the first half of the day emphatically. Over 120 kilometres of racing, and the yellow jersey has a bigger advantage on the road than he started off with. So hats off to him, as Paul Voss is engaged in a solo effort to bridge across to the 3 up the road, and Vincenzo Nibali goes with him. So another attack from Vincenzo Nibali on the left-hand side of the road. Forces a reaction too as well from the rest of the big group of riders. Alexis Villamoz from AG2R La Mondiale and Duracek from La
Steve
Merida.
Cummings is about to go there, so you can see now they all know this is moving now. They have to make sure they're there. Because it's easy just to sit around and not do anything, and then before you know it, that group's got a minute, and then you're stuck with guys who won't ride with you, and it's all over. So they have to get it moving, and Nibali, we're seeing the motivation he has. He seems to be one of the most nervous riders in this group.
Breaking into little bits and pieces. There must be 4 distinct groups on the road here from this 29 as it begins to break apart. Jasper Stuyven is the last man on the road in that group, so he's got work to do if he wants to be part of the selection that is unfolding on the road in front of him. Navarro and Matti Breschel and Antoine Duchesne.
And you can see these moves are forcing that time gap back up. So, and you can see not only was the pursuit speeding up, but they'd slowed down so much in this move that they had to reboot the race and do this, because now they're getting back in control and holding back the peloton.
Engaged in a furious chase to get across to these 3. Last time we saw Paul Voss, Vincenzo Nibali, Alexis Villamoz, among others. So there are riders strewn all the way from first to last of this 29, all the way across the road. Jasper Stuyven is the last man in the group. Just trying to catch a glimpse of that blue jersey of Vincenzo Nibali further up the road. I think he's gone. Don't think the blue jersey you see there belongs to Lutsenko, the other Astana rider. Tony Martin's the wrong side of the split, so too is Daryl Impey and Skarbu Gurmai. But I think his teammate Duracek is moving. But these 3 at the front of the race are definitely moving, and it's going to be a real battle to get on terms with them. Yeah, glance back from Danny Navarro and from Antoine Duchesne to see who's trying to come across and whether or not they're there. A triple flick of the elbow, just to indicate that there's a right-hander from Duchesne. He leads them round. They're working well together, these 3, and they've forced a split.
Yeah, this is great for Navarro now, because the problem is when you're in that group behind, it's going to keep attacking each other, and you lose so much energy. At least these guys may be off the front, but at least it's a steady control pace, and it's not the constant jumping around nervousness. And Navarro, this is a dream scenario with these 2 guys, because he'll be able to leave them on the Aspen at will.
Well, the cameras seem to have lost sight of Vincenzo Nibali just now. What we do know is that the last time we saw him, he was attacking again, maybe for the 3rd time, determined to force a selection as Steve Cummings goes again. So it's a fluid, dynamic position on the road at the moment. There is Nibali. He's back in that group of 29. Cummings is attacking further up the road. You can see them there in the distance. That's the target. 3 riders, Navarro, Breschel and Antoine Duchesne. Can they bridge across to that? Cummings is on the move. The man with his head bowed, the white helmet of Steve Cummings, has made the junction, and it's a big gap that's opened up. Joining that trio of Danny Navarro, Antoine Duchesne and Matti Breschel, now Steve Cummings. On the move once again. And that was a huge effort to get across. He did it in about, what, it took him about 3-4 minutes of flat-out effort, maybe a little more. And he sat on at the back and didn't share the work for just about a kilometre, but he's part of this breakaway now, and he will be expected to do his share of the pace setting to make sure that this group of 4 breaks the elastic and stays away.
Yeah, I mean, what he did there, that's Steve Cummings at his best. It's, he timed it, everyone else was jumping around and getting frustrated with each other, and he just sat there watching them, and then in one move, that's all he did, one massive move, and bridged it across, and nobody could go with him. And he went with the sole intention of not taking anybody with him and bridging across there on his own. And you can see the gap behind just there with that shot with the yellow jersey group, which I think is about 4 or 5 riders in between. So there's this group, then there's the yellow jersey group of about 4 or 5 riders, and then the remnants of that 29.
Well, there's the yellow jersey group, Greg Van Avermaet. It's the second group on the road. Paul Martins from Lotto Jumbo's made that selection. Daryl Impey is there too. I think it might be Sebastian Langefeld, is it? The Cannondale Drapac rider. And Perichon from Fortuneo is the other rider there in that group of 5. One there is Lutsenko from Astana. So Vincenzo Nibali has missed out, having made all those attacks. He is back in, I think last time we saw him in this group, or he's on the move. There's a group of 2 riders just ahead of this group, which contains Fabian Cancellara and Tony Martin. That is the 4th group on the road, and those are 4 feet in a big bale of straw, and I'm not quite sure what the message there is. No.
Oh, they're crushing grapes, maybe.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and you see Lutsenko in that group, so Nibali's in a bit of a, obviously he's in a situation he would rather not be in, but at least he's got a teammate in the group in front that's not working. So Lutsenko sitting on with that group of 5, and he was just sitting on the back, aware that Nibali will be coming, because I'm sure Nibali's told him on the radio that I'm coming up. So instantly that means he'll sit on and wait, and maybe even drop back and try and help him to get back on. But that would be a risky manoeuvre. He'd have to know that he could bring Vincenzo Nibali back onto that group.
Well, I'm quite glad the helicopters moved on, actually. France, eh?
That was weird.
Now, the net effect of all of this activity up front is that this has become a 4-man team time trial at this phase of the race, and it's having some effect on the gap between the front of the race and the group containing, well, the peloton containing Chris Froome, Nairo Quintana, and all the big favourites for the race. When they got on the move, they had an advantage of about 3:45, and that's gone up by almost a minute, so they've got themselves right back in this race.
Yeah, no, that's what had to happen. That big group was no longer working, and they had to break it up, and the smartest move was to make sure you were the first one to go and make it strong enough to stick, which is what happened here. And Steve Cummings, this is very much reminding me of that final stage in the Dauphiné where he went away and just took the mickey, really. It was unbelievable how strong he was. And I think that's the thing, that they've only got 13 kilometres now to the foot of the Aspen, and we see this group, the remnants of the 29 riders, all momentum's lost now. They've got to go now. If you're going to go, you've got to go and try and get to the yellow jersey group, or get across to Nibali, who's still just in front of this group, chasing down that group of 6, the yellow jersey group.
Yeah, they're not working particularly well together, this group, trying to chase back on. Being headed at the moment by IM Cycling's Oliver Nason, with Gorka Izagirre from Movistar. He's an interesting rider as well. He's more in the kind of... His role in this breakaway is less obvious. It's more the Lutsenko kind of role for, maybe he might be placed there for Fabio Aru later, in the same way Gorka Izagirre might be put to use by both Alejandro Valverde and Nairo Quintana.
Yeah, for sure. Same with Kirienka. So they're there as basically kind of on point, if you like. They're the forward forces for those 2 GC teams, so they can be used if required. And look, that's Lutsenko looking behind, seeing if Nibali's making it across. So we can't see that, but
well, it's one of those situations. There he is. There's Vincenzo Nibali. That's why Alexei Lutsenko was looking over his shoulder, because effectively I think Lutsenko has to work for Nibali here. He may not be the leader of Astana, but he's Vincenzo Nibali, and he's the #1 man, and probably on paper of all the riders in the breakaway, if it stays away, he'd be the favourite. He climbs and he descends, and that's what awaits us in the next 30.5 kilometres over the Aspan. There are 700 metres to the only intermediate sprint of the day. The yellow jersey group is trying hard to get across to the group up the road, which has just exploded again, I can tell you. This man, Steve Cummings, has decided that they were just about to be caught by Astana, essentially, with Alexei Lutsenko burying himself to bring Vincenzo Nibali across to the front of the race, and Cummings thought enough was enough. You can see the remainder of that original group of three, with the exception of Dani Navarro, have been swept up by the yellow jersey group containing Vincenzo Nibali, but Cummings is soloing across the sprint line, which marks 25.5 kilometres away to the finish line of today's stage. And he's at it again, David Miller, but this is even further out and even more demanding than that exceptional stage win on the Dauphiné.
No, I think this is actually closer. He was on his own for much longer at Dauphiné, almost 40-50 kilometres. And so I think this is, if there's one rider we know who can do this, it's Steve Cummings, who's done it recently. So most riders that attack solo now, and you think, oh, that's a bit futile, especially with a big climb coming up. But he's proved in the recent weeks that this is a move he can do.
Well, how often have we seen this? Every time that this man has entered a World Tour stage race this year, he's come away with a stage win. Vocal encouragement with a British accent from the side of the road here in the foothills of the Pyrenees. Pretty soon, in about 6 kilometres time, he's going to be turning right-handed and will be taking on the Col d'Aspin. This is the remains of that 29-man breakaway. Tony Martin and Fabian Cancellara in that group. They're their third group on the road. And this is the front of the race, and it belongs once again to Dimension Data. 3 stage wins already with Mark Cavendish and the yellow jersey and the green jersey, and now they're looking for a stage win in the familiar but different shape of Steve Cummings, the man from Liverpool, in the form of his life. 4 minutes and 52 seconds, that's his advantage over the group of favourites, the main peloton, where Chris Froome and Nairo Quintana are gearing up for a private battle all of their own.
There's 20 seconds, I just heard on Race Radio, Steve Cummings has 20 seconds on this group.
Wow.
And they can't mess about.
Navarro has rejoined,
caught.
yeah, he's been caught, so this is essentially the second group on the road.
And Nibali has his teammate who's basically slogging away. Lutsenko's now turned into Domestique, but that's almost not such a good thing, because Lutsenko is not going to be able to match Steve Cummings. Steve Cummings versus Lutsenko, Steve Cummings is going to win every time. So they need to work together and get this rolling fast and make sure they're all rested for when they get that gap as small as possible, as Lutsenko just pulls off again after his long turn.
Well, he timed his attack to absolute perfection, because the junction was just about to be made. Lutsenko had dragged Vincenzo Nibali and the rest of this yellow jersey group to within touching distance of the group of 3, who'd looked over their shoulders, Navarro and Duchesne, and Matti Breschel and the rest of them, and decided the prudent thing was probably at this point, since they were about to be caught, to sit up. And that was precisely the moment at which the chase were exerting themselves to the absolute maximum that Cummings decided to attack.
Yeah, it's a bit of a textbook move, and you can see there's not even so much harmony in this group at the moment, with gaps opening up. Greg Van Avermaet is proving how strong he is, because he was one of the ones that forced the move in the initial chase of the Cummings group, and really does seem to be just continues. He's completely recovered from his escapade 2 days ago.
Well, it's full of intrigue today, and it is full of dynamism. That original 29-man breakaway group has split into 3 distinct parts now. 2 of equal size. The yellow jersey group of about a dozen riders, and 1 lone rider at the front of the race. And the last time we heard, he had a 20-second advantage over the chase, and the last time we saw it, he was out of sight, round the bend and disappearing into the distance. There is Vincenzo Nibali's teammate and the notional leader of Team Astana. That's Fabio Aru, sitting behind Jakob Fuglsang, looking calm and collected. How is this day panning out for Fabio Aru in particular, watching Vincenzo Nibali off the front and looking for a stage win?
Well, I'm sure it'll be mixed emotions, because I presume he'd have liked to have Nibali with him to help him in the mountains, but at the same time he's got other teammates, and I think what's probably good for him, and there's the heat gun we can see, so this is one of the new devices UCI are using. They're just making sure Steve Cummings doesn't have a motor.
Well, let's hope that's a negative result, but this is just textbook Cummings.
Yeah, this is amazing.
And it's amazing to see a rider who has one modus operandi, and so everyone knows what he's going to do, and we see it time and time again, because it's just a carbon copy over and over again of how he wins stages. And yet, more often than not, especially this year, the peloton seems powerless to do anything about it, because he's that good when he delivers.
Well, they were powerless just then. He watched a as the group he got in the group of 29. He was one of the last to get in it, actually. Remember, we saw, well, the initial group of 10, he got across on his own, and then all the little groups of 2 and 3 started coming across, and that was just after the first hour. Then he sat in that group, in the group of 29, fairly invisible, until it started attacking again. And again, he waited for the one good move to go, and then he bridged across on his own. So he did that. So that's twice he'd done that in a day. And then once that group was gone and it was getting caught again, he timed his attack textbook to go the moment it was being caught. And now everybody was powerless to it. I mean, that's how good he is tactically and how strong he is to back it up.
Well, that is the third group, and that's the group with Martin and Cancellara, and that seems to be breaking down as well. You see riders going off the front, Scarbu Gurmai and Gorka Izagirre. 2 climbers trying to get further up the road, and they've attacked that group, so there are 4 groups now in front of the main peloton. Nothing available at the sprint point for the likes of Cavendish and Sagan. Only 15 riders score points at intermediate sprints, and indeed at the finish line. Variable a number of points each day. This is a mountain stage, so there are fewer points on offer in the green jersey competition. At the finish line, and there's the green jersey himself. So much relieved, I would imagine. Mark Cavendish didn't have to sprint today at all after all that.
And the peloton has completely stopped his chase. As I say that, Movistar are winding it up again. So I just don't know what Movistar are doing. They keep they commit, then they soft pedal again, then they commit. They're not going to catch anything if they keep doing this. They've only got 3, so this group only has 5 kilometers to get to the bottom of the climb. So if they're going to go now, they're going to have to just do a massive chase to the bottom.
Well, it's not long now before Steve Cummings will be turning onto the Col d'Aspin. It's a long climb, 12 kilometres in total, and it will determine whether or not this will be another famous day for Steve Cummings. Welcome back. There'll be no more commercial breaks between now and the finish of this absolutely fascinating bike race. We're on the slopes of the Col d'Aspin. A huge battle developing now as they hit the Aspin, the first Category 1 climb of the Tour de France. For the stage win, first and foremost, this man, Vincenzo Nibali, the Tour de France winner in 2014. The man who's just come from winning the Giro d'Italia is trying to hunt down the lone leader of Steve Cummings. Meanwhile, further down the road, just under 5 minutes now, a battle is developing as this lot motor towards the foot of the climb. Remember, when they hit the foot of the climb, they'll have 19 kilometres still to go to the finish line. Over the top of the Aspin and down the other side towards this new finish line by the lake here, just the other side of this huge mountain that Steve Cummings is trying to get over in one piece with his lead intact. Last time we saw it, he had about 25 seconds over the yellow jersey group. Greg Van Avermaet is hanging on to this group in great fashion here. And the pace is all being set by Vincenzo Nibali, hunting down Cummings at the front. And look, that gap is stable. 26, 27 seconds. It was 33, and then Lutsenko popped off the front, the Astana Domestique. Nibali had to start to do the work for himself. Instantly, he shaved off about 7 or 8 seconds into Cummings' advantage, but it's holding firm, if not at this point of the climb, actually going out.
Yeah, and he'll want to, if he can, he's going to try and catch Cummings way before the top, because he'd probably want to catch him and then try and drop him, because he won't want to cross with him, because he knows that Steve Cummings is fast in the sprint, and you definitely put your money more on Cummings than you would on Nibali if they were going head-to-head in a sprint. You have Mark Cavendish, who's just sitting up now, rightfully so, I think. So they're about to do the sharp right-hander, and then the Gruppetto will form.
British riders from Dimension Data at the front and at the back of the race. Steve Cummings trying to ride out the greatest win of his career to date, and he's got some wins to boast about already, by the way. And at the back, the green jersey of Mark Cavendish is waiting for the formation of the sprinters Gruppetto to get them all over this climb, the first big Pyrenean mountain of this year's Tour de France, in one piece. Meanwhile, the French national champion has gone to the front of the FDJ train, trying to set things up, interestingly, for Thibaut Pinot, of whom we haven't seen a great deal so far on the Tour de France. Are we going to see an attack from him today? Dan Martin from Ethics Quickstep is tucked in behind their FDJ train, and there is Nairo Quintana as well. And for the time being, Team Sky aren't too close to the front of the peloton as they now hit the slopes of the Col d'Aspin, 4:37 behind Steve Cummings.
And you can see Vincenzo Nibali's not even asking anybody to help him. He doesn't believe they'll be able to help him, really. So he's just going to set his own pace, and that's Alex House just coming off his wheel. They're taking turns on Vincenzo Nibali's wheels. They're turning behind him. But Vincenzo Nibali, he knows how to do this. He's won the Tour de France. He's one of the great Grand Tour riders of his generation. And probably a pure climber, really. He's learned everything else to make himself, give himself a better arsenal. But when it comes to climbing, he'll know how to pace this. But for the moment, Steve Cummings is matching him pedal for pedal.
So Vichot with Pinot in third wheel here, and the FDJ train roaring up the Col d'Aspin. The pace is furious, blown to the foot of the Col d'Aspin by a very, very strong tailwind. And when they get over the top and into the final couple of kilometres as well, that wind is just howling up the valley to the finish line here. It's hot in the south of France, the sun is out, the predicted rain has stayed away. They'll be glad of that. And for the first time now, we're seeing a big race on a big mountain of the Tour de France. The world champion, Peter Sagan, is in the Gruppetto, and he is going backwards on the slopes of the Col d'Aspin.
This climb's quite an interesting one because it's fairly steady the first few kilometres, and then with about 5Ks to go, you can see that's, I think, it's about 7 Ks to go still. But it's steep. You get a section of about a kilometre where it's 9%, and so that'll be a moment where Vincenzo Nibali has to get to and try and close as much then. The thing is, as well, with today, it's not your usual situation where the breakaway's hitting the mountain and exhausted. That breakaway formed after an hour. It's been high-speed tailwind most of the day, 29 riders. In theory, really, these guys only really started racing about 20 kilometres ago properly. So they're coming into this climb strong and fresh still, fresh-ish. But you see how Steve Cummings he's equally and completely in control. He's in full time trial mode now.
The number you have to look out for in the top left-hand corner of your screen that indicates kilometres to go is 7. At 7K, that is when they go over the top of the Col d'Aspin, and in some senses, that's Steve Cummings' immediate finish line. If you can get over the top with something of an advantage there over the rest, it really is game on for him.
Normally you'd say that, but the thing is, with Vincenzo Nibali, he's one of the best descenders in the world, and so he'd want to have a good 10-15 seconds on Nibali going over the top. It's not simply a case with most riders just having 10 seconds, 5 seconds, even 5 seconds would be enough over the top of it. But I think with Vincenzo Nibali coming up behind, you want to have a bit of a gap still, because you know he's going to attack that descent like a lunatic.
As Marcel Kittel goes backwards into the Gruppetto, you can see some big names just dropping to the back of the race as the Tour de France morphs into a completely different shape. It's no longer about the sprinters. This is about the big GC men. This is about the mountain goats, the men who have ambitions of getting themselves onto the podium, if not better, on the Tour de France. That's the battle there as Vincenzo Nibali further up the road is just looking for a stage win. I say just. It's a really tough ask for Vincenzo Nibali, who's being asked a serious question here by Steve Cummings. Attack coming from the front of the
Barguil.
Warren Barguil, yes it is, for Giant Alpecin, the young French talent. So the first of the young Frenchmen to go on the Col d'Aspin is Warren Barguil, and he's gone very, very early. They've barely been climbing probably less than a kilometre, and Barguil goes.
Well, it's a strange climb because they've got sections of tailwinds, sections of headwinds, so he's probably chosen one of these sections where he knows he can get a decent gap.
Through 15 kilometres they go, and we've got 2 races on the Aspin. Steve Cummings wants the stage, the rest want to make a big mark on the general classification. Nibali, he is the one doing most of the work, and finally the yellow jersey loses contact with that group. He's done brilliantly to hold on for as long as he has on the Col d'Aspin. Greg Van Avermaet, who is not a climber, and well, Nibali is, you can see by his facial expressions, holding nothing back here, nor too is Danny Navarro. Those two are the pure climbers, and Daryl Impey is riding exceptionally well to live in their company at the moment. Further up the road, Steve Cummings is just solely focused on what Steve Cummings does best. He does it on his own, he does it by attacking a breakaway, and normally it works. So it's not for want of experience or form. If he pulls up short today, he's done everything right to this point, but only to this point. 14.6 very, very difficult kilometres still remain, and they separate Cummings from history.
Daryl Impey is doing an amazing ride when we can take into consideration he's generally a lead-out man for Michael Matthews or Simon Gerrans, and a sprinter in his own right. So, but we've always seen from Daryl Impey that contrary to what you'd expect from most sprinters, he can get over pretty decent climbs. But this isn't just a pretty decent climb. This is a proper mountain.
Although, to play devil's advocate, you might argue that if Daryl Impey can live with Vincenzo Nibali, then we're not looking at Vincenzo Nibali from a couple of years ago.
Well, although saying that, like I said, they come into this climb quite fresh. It's the only mountain in the day. obviously if there are 2 or 3 mountains, that's when we really see the climbers get the advantage.
Yeah.
Also, the bottomless climb, it's fairly steady, and it's a lot of tailwind on the direction they're going at the moment. And now starts to switch a bit more tail headwind as they do the switchbacks. But I think at the moment we'll see, like I said, 5 kilometers from the summit, it ramps up for a kilometer, and that's where probably I'd be surprised if Daryl Impey can hold on to Nibali there. And if he can, that means that Steve Cummings has advantage, because Nibali isn't going as well as he is at his best.
Well, congratulations for Daryl Impey and to Steve Cummings for where they are in the race at the moment, but huge doffing of caps for this man. The yellow jersey of Greg Van Avermaet. Colleagues from Belgian media were very confident about his chances of holding on to the yellow jersey today, but I don't imagine for a minute they thought it would be like this, where he's actually gaining time on the general classification rather than just holding on to minutes and seconds.
No, exactly. At the race he's going at the moment, he'll be crossing Aspen 5th on the road, which if you told him that this morning, he'd have just thought you were mad. But this is the man who's doing the ride at the moment. I mean, Steve Cummings, he's holding Nibali off completely, and he does look still like he's in control. He knows how to do this, Steve. He's very good at finding his rhythm, and it's exactly what he did at the Dauphiné a few weeks ago.
Navarro glances over to see what Vincenzo Nibali still has left in the lockup. Time gaps have disappeared from our screen rather frustratingly at the moment, but every time we see the moto camera with the road in front of the Nibali group, we don't see the cars behind Steve Cummings, so he hasn't got a visual contact with him just yet. He's round switchbacks, and he is still visibly, or invisibly I should say, clear of the chase organised by Vincenzo Nibali. And the latest information we're getting from Race Radio, David Miller, is that it's now 35 seconds between the Tête de la Course, the front of the race, Steve Cummings, and the Nibali group. And if that's true, that's exceptional. That's
exceptional, and you can see that Nibali, he keeps sort of accelerating and then sitting up again. I don't think he's happy about just dragging Navarro with him. But at the same time, if he wants to win this race, he's going to have to go. He's just going to have to go and take Navarro. It's that or you lose everything.
I think Warren Barguil has come back to that group. No, there he is.
No, that's
Fabian Cancellara. Sorry, forgive me, how can I get those two muddled up? So this is the remains of the breakaway, being swept up by the general classification race unfolding behind them, still being set by FDJ, and I think Warren Barguil has come back. So that little attack, that flurry of attack from the Giant Alpecin rider has been reeled back in, and I think he's back. So the GC race, still 4 minutes and 31 seconds down. I don't think they're going to be contesting a stage victory. I think Cummings has dashed any hopes that Movistar might have had in that direction, or indeed Team Sky, or any of the rest of them. So 2 races for the price of 1 today. There'll be people watching this back home in the United Kingdom, David Miller, who will be all asking themselves, there's confirmation of what we just heard, 36 seconds, so he's eating, well, he's not having his advantage eaten into, it's actually stretching out. And there'll be people wondering why on earth this man has not been selected for the Great Britain team in the Rio Games. I know Steve Cummings thinks that is a ridiculous decision. He made his feelings abundantly clear before this race got underway, and the statement that he's making here on this race really backs up his sentiments.
No, exactly, especially on this terrain. This isn't your standard transition stage where the breakaway goes away. This is the first mountain stage, and he's putting time into Nibali and Navarro on the Col d'Aspen. So this proves that he can climb with the best on his day, and that is one of the arguments he's had, that yeah, he might not be renowned as a climber in stage races, etc., but come the day he can be one of the best climbers in the world.
Tony Martin comes back to the fold. His day in the breakaway is gone. He might, if he's got anything left in his legs, which knowing Tony Martin he probably has done, do a little bit of work now for Dan Martin. Indeed, Martin just gets onto his wheel, so the 2 Martins from Etixx Quick-Step are together. 45 seconds we're now hearing on Race Radio between the Navarro-Nibali group and Steve Cummings. He's going away all the time. He took 33 seconds onto the slopes of the Col d'Aspen, and he's pulled away a further 12. He's got 5.5k to go to the top, has Cummings, and at the moment he's turning things to his favour. Meanwhile, it's getting harder and harder for Greg Van Avermaet. He's being distanced now to that group of Nibali, Navarro and Daryl Impey, remarkably, but he's holding on, and his time is remarkable.
303 meters, so 300 meters ahead of Steve Cummings is 300 meters ahead of Nibali, which on a climb is fairly significant, because they're just about to hit the steepest section of the climb now, where it's at 9%. So this is where we're going to see if Steve really, if he can hold that time gap through that section, then we know he's completely in control.
Suits him though, this. You know, he'll have thought about the nature of the Col d'Aspen. I'm sure a mountain he knows extremely well. He's raced over it many times. and he knows it suits him. There are steep-ish gradients, 9% those, well within his compass. There aren't the killer gradients which might unpick and completely explode his effort. So this is a perfect mountain for Steve Cummings.
So far, this whole stage has been perfect for him. He's done everything textbook, and it really would be, looking back over the tactics so far, just a textbook example of how to ride a bike race, how to get in the breakaway, how to attack them, when to go. And at the moment, this is perfect, because maybe not being a pure climber, it's much better for him to be on the climb at a steady pace that he can control. And so this is the steepest section of the climb right here. It's about to go up here, and it goes up to 9% now for 1 kilometre, 9.5%.
Yeah, the road towards the top of the Col d'Aspin, which is a shoulder pass, it's a col. They go over the top and then descend, is more and more exposed, and the long sections without switchbacks are longer and longer towards the top as well. The wind will be in his favour largely, although as you can see, like most of these big Pyrenean or Alpine climbs, it switches direction through switchbacks all the time, but predominantly he'll be picking up a tailwind on this climb.
And there we can see it's a significant gap he has there, 48 seconds, I mean, approaching a minute. That's going to be very difficult now for Nibali or Navarro to do anything about it. We'll know immediately here if Nibali is going well, stands any chance, because this would be the moment in this steep section at 5Ks to go that he'd have to go.
So this is the fourth group on the road, a one-man group containing the yellow jersey. How often have we seen this in the past? Normally Thomas Voeckler has been the man who's been loaned the yellow jersey in the Pyrenees, and famously in 2004 and then again in 2011 on the Plateau de Bay. In both editions of the race that year, he held on, dug in and defended his lead, but on both those occasions Thomas Voeckler saw his time and his lead in the overall classification chipped away at and diminished and shortened. What Greg Van Avermaet is doing, and that's why it's so exceptional, is he is extending it on the race today. Brilliant ride from Van Avermaet. Warren Barguil, just confirmation, we just caught a glimpse of him. He is back there and he's just behind Romain Bardet. Quintana looks a bit twitchy, the Movistar man, as if he wants to do something. Will he? That's the big question further back down the road. The big question that Vincenzo Nibali will be asking himself is, what am I doing being beaten up the Col d'Aspin by a man from the Wirral, Steve Cummings? Unsightly spectators won't be bothering Steve Cummings at this point. He's just been entirely focused on controlling this effort. The summit is getting closer and Vincenzo Nibali is getting more and more distant. Cummings, according to those statistics, climbing at just under 20% at a 10% gradient, and Vincenzo Nibali on a lesser percentage gradient, going slower. I'd treat those with some caution now, and Vincenzo Nibali is just trying to inject a bit of urgency into his chase, getting out of the saddle, repositioning himself and trying to go again. Sometimes you have to force yourself to do that, just to change the rhythm that is developed almost automatically in your ride.
Well, it's very much that's a climber's style. They tend to keep accelerating, and then Navarro is going as well. But Nibali he's clearly not at his best. He's accelerating again, but he needs to just commit and chase completely rather than playing games. If he wants to do this, the only chance he has of getting Steve Cummings back is by now going completely full gas for as long as he can and trying to bring it back, because it continues to go up the gap. It's 50 seconds now.
And remember that Vincenzo Nibali is not playing a GC race here. There's not another day that he's thinking about further down the road or any other longer term plans on the Tour de France. This is it. Go for a stage win. That's clearly why he lost time the other day. This was his game plan. There's no reason to hold back. He's just got to commit. But maybe, physically, he just can't match Steve Cummings at the moment, and it is as simple as that.
Well, I think we've seen, since we got to see the images at the beginning of the day when the break was forming, and seeing the speed he got across to that on his own, it was already, that took our breath away, and then he did it again later on when he bridged across to the move that then he dropped and attacked again. So he's clearly been the strongest guy in that break all day, and he's, instead of waiting around and letting anybody else dictate, he's dictated it for himself. He's always made the decisions, taken his options, and not hesitated at all.
The Col d'Aspin peaks at 1,409 metres above sea level. It's not the big beasts that we still have to come, notably tomorrow in the Pyrenees, and then that sequence of high mountain passes in the Alps that will decide the final outcome of the Tour de France. But it is a significant hurdle, the first Cat 1 climb, being danced up at the moment by the lone leader, Steve Cummings, who is soaring away from the rest and putting Vincenzo Nibali firmly in the hurt box as he tries to get back on terms with Cummings. At the moment, at this point on the climb, with Cummings just under 4 kilometres from the top of the climb. He's going backwards. 55 seconds is what we're hearing from Race Radio, and confirmation that that's about right. On the road, Nibali has lost 20 seconds so far on this climb to Steve Cummings. It is, when you put it in those raw terms, it's extraordinary.
It is, but we're used to extraordinary performances from Steve Cummings of late. What he did at the Dauphiné on that final stage was extraordinary. There's very few riders are capable of doing that. And that day he rode the last 40, 50 Ks on his own after being in a break and attacking it. And it seemed like a bit of a folly to do that. And yet he then held off a heavy chasing. I think it was Movistar that were chasing that day. I can't quite remember, but they were in a full chase. Oh no, it was Etixx Quick-Step, and they were chasing at their maximum pace, and he kept putting time into them for 40 kilometers on his own. So we know he can do that.
Should this end in a stage victory for Steve Cummings, which is looking more and more likely, it has to be said, you can almost talk about it at this stage in the race as being a probability, then each successive stage victory is more and more impressive. The stage is grander, the way he does it is bigger and more expansive, because when he won the stage on the Tour de France last year on the Massif Central, it was a medium mountain stage, which ended with that famous 2 or 3 kilometre climb up to Mende. This is a different scale of mountain altogether, and in Vincenzo Nibali, he's dispatching a different calibre of opponent as well.
Well, that day, I mean, I think he proved... Unfortunately, he paced. We didn't get to see much from him because the cameras were focused on Thibaut Pinot and Romain Bardet, who are exceptional climbers in their own right. And Steve was slightly behind them, and he was almost taken off the pitch. We thought he was dropped, and yet he caught them right in the final and made a fool of them, taking the stage. But it meant that we didn't really get to see him much on that climb, which is a very, very hard climb as well. 3 or 4 Ks over 10%.
Adam Yates is very prominent towards the front of the group of GC riders in the blue of Orica Bike Exchange, as riders in that original breakaway move of 29 continue to be swept up by the GC group. Driven in the early parts of the Col d'Aspin by Thibaut Pinot, to no great effect. Pinot is going backwards here, losing contact with the group of favourites. He should be riding alongside Romain Bardet, Warren Barguil and the rest, of course the big guns of Chris Froome and Nairo Quintana, but he's not. Not good signs for Thibaut Pinot at the moment. He's still in that group, but dangling off the back. Meanwhile, want to know what a strong rider looks like? Tony Martin, who's been very active in that group of 29 up the road all day, in that breakaway, is now working hard for Dan Martin at the front.
I tell you what's very impressive as well is to take into account that since Steve Cummings has been off the front and since they hit the bottom of the climb, they've only taken back 30 seconds on Steve Cummings. So he's holding off the front part of the peloton. The actual climbing part of the peloton is barely taking time back on him.
Not much he can't do at the moment, Steve Cummings, it seems. Every time he pins a number on and decides it's race day, which he doesn't always decide, it seems to pay off. And now, for the first time we're hearing on Race Radio, get this, his advantage has gone out over Vincenzo Nibali to over a minute, 1:05. That's what we're hearing from the slopes of the Col d'Aspin. He's got 2.7 kilometres remaining to the top as Cummings passes through all on his own, 10 kilometres to go to the finish line. That descent cannot come fast enough for Cummings. But having said that, and this is the remarkable truth, he's making this uphill section of the final today work to his advantage.
For sure, he'll be believing he can do it now. I mean, to be honest with you, he may have known exactly what he was doing the whole day and believed in his abilities to drop everybody. But yeah, with 1:05, with only a few kilometres to go, he's you would never say it's in the bag, but it's definitely not looking like it's looking very much in his favour at the moment.
Domenico Pozzovivo, the small Italian climber from AG2R La Mondiale, moves to the front, just goes clear a little bit, and Pinot is in big trouble here on the Col d'Aspin. Big trouble. Not a good sign at all for the Frenchman. He's had a brilliant season so far, reinvented himself to some extent, can time trial brilliant, had great hopes, as did the French nation on the Tour de France, and at the first indication on the first Cat 1 climb, the signs are not good for Pinot.
Well, we noticed as well on stage 5, the stage that Greg Van Avermaet won, when they hit that last climb after Movistar had ripped the peloton to pieces, he was one of the riders at the back, not looking good at all, but we took it as just maybe being a bit of a bad day, but this is clearly more than a bad day. There's something going on here.
Yeah, that's bad news. Pozzovivo, I don't quite know what this is all about. He's 10.5 minutes down in the general classification, 10-12 down in the general classification, so he's no threat, nothing that people are going to have to react to. But is he setting something up here for Romain Bardet? Because we all expected a move for Bardet. Watch out for the man from AG2 La Mondiale. He might well be expecting to bridge across to Pozzovivo and use him in the final.
Yeah, that would be the tactic you'd want to use for sure. There's the IAM rider who's now attack going across. So this is actually good. If Bardet is planning on moving, you want to have a few riders up there, and he's got a teammate now to use as a, because there's slightly headwind up towards the top. And there's Bardet on the left of the screen behind Pierre Rolland of Cannondale Drapac. And then Tony Martin, who's still sitting there looking after Dan Martin.
Adam Yates looks very comfortable as well, significantly more comfortable than Thibaut Pinot, who's struggling and going backwards, and now has definitively lost contact with the group of favourites and will be losing time and probably losing any hope he would have had at this stage of making his mark on the Tour de France, eyeing up a possible podium. Or better, not going to happen on this kind of form at all. Steve Morabito is the man who's dropped back with him, the Swiss rider, his Mountain Domestique, and he's actually going better up this climb than
Is this
Thibaut Pinot.
Matthias Frank? I'm not sure.
No, I don't think that's Frank. No, Frank's a smaller rider than that. One of the IAM cycling riders has attacked. It's Jarleton Pantano.
Ah, there you go.
Pantano has bridged across to Domenico Pozzovivo, and what we're hearing on the radio unofficially is that Cummings now has 1 minute 9 seconds over Vincenzo Nibali and only 1.6 kilometres of climbing still to go before he starts to descend towards the finish line. Mountain goat indeed, Steve Cummings. A rider reinventing himself. 1:11 we're hearing now, stretching it out all the time and riding towards an almost certain stage victory at this point, unless Danny Navarro can do something about it now. Nibali goes with him. Navarro decides whatever Nibali is able to offer, it ain't enough. And we're going to have to do this now. The road is running out. But Daryl Impey is just holding on to the coattails of these two pure climbers, and it's a remarkable indication of how well he's going.
Oh, it is remarkable because, like I said, it's about somebody who can bunch sprints coming over the Aspen with Navarro and Nibali. It's, yeah, he's flying.
Well, Navarro looks like he is intent on cracking Nibali. Nibali's responding, looking fairly comfortable at the moment, but they're just not, it's just not a strong enough effort at the moment, because what Cummings is doing here, all on his own, is exceptional. 1:07, so it's hovering around about what we were hearing on the radio. We did hear just a few minutes ago that it had gone out to 1:14, but if he can take a minute over the top, or anything just like that, even if it's 50 seconds, is that enough in your eyes?
Completely. I mean, I think we know Nibali's a great descender, but he's not going to. It's only a 5k descent, and although it's 7k's, looks like 7k's descent to the finish. It's 5k's down, then there's 2k's of false flats, of flattish, and then kicks up a little bit at the finish. But no, you'd be safe with 20 seconds, 30 seconds over the top. So if he's got a minute, over a minute, then it really is going to be no problem for him. As Nibali explodes.
Yeah, well, Navarro saw signs of weakness there from Vincenzo Nibali repeatedly, and he's gone and he's attacked him, and Nibali is dying here. He's been dropped, get this, by Daryl Impey. Impey drops Vincenzo Nibali on the Côte d'Aspin, and he's after Danny Navarro. I don't think he'll get across to the Cofidis man, or will he? This is the ride of his life here from Daryl Impey on this Cat 1 climb. But Navarro is the second man on the road, and he will threaten the time a little bit now of Steve Cummings, because that is a proper acceleration from the Cofidis climber, the Spaniard in the ranks of that French team.
But there we can see the 1 kilometre to go to the summit, so I'd say it's pretty safe now for Steve Cummings. He's just got to make sure in the descent he keeps a cool head and doesn't make any mistakes, because these guys are coming up quite fast, but I don't think not fast enough, that's for sure.
Van Avermaet is, what is he now, the fifth rider on the road, unless he's been caught. I don't think he has. I think he's out there all on his own.
Yeah,
Navarro's second rider, and he passes through 1 kilometre to go there. So you saw Cummings go through that arch about a minute ago, and Danny Navarro is the second man on the road, and Impey's just battling hard to get onto terms with Navarro. Meanwhile, nothing is happening further back down the road. They're certainly not eating into the advantage of Nibali, Van Avermaet, and of course Cummings, and nobody has made a big move apart from Barguil and, well, AG2 La Mondiale. What are they doing? Domenico Pozzovivo, and he's got another teammate who's gone up the road now, Romain Bardet.
Well, so they've got 2 riders from the break.
Is that Villamoz?
Yeah.
So Villamoz has been swept up, and he's going to have to work again. So Pozzovivo and Villamoz and Jarleton Pantano are just a little bit off the front of the group of favourites. When is Bardet going to attack? There's only the only sense it makes of Pozzovivo's move is if Bardet attacks. So expect that move to come at some point, maybe a little bit closer to the top. because Bardet will exploit his descending capabilities to extend any advantage he takes over the top of the group of favourites.
Now Steve Cummings will come around that corner, then he'll actually see the summit properly for the first time, and then he can start to really believe that this is going to happen, which considering the amount of variables he's had to deal with since the beginning of the day, a break looking like it was gone, then another one, and then choosing finally the right one, and that ending up being 29 riders and whistling down. He's just dominated the race in such a cool-headed manner.
So just to reiterate, Dani Navarro is no threat at all in the overall classification, nearly half an hour down on the race leader Greg Van Avermaet, so 25 minutes down or thereabouts to the likes of Froome and Quintana, nor is Steve Cummings on the Col d'Aspin any kind of threat in the general classification. He's simply looking for a stage win, and he is very, very close to being a nailed-on favourite to take another win on the Tour de France. Over the top he goes. 7 kilometres to go now for Steve Cummings before he takes another victory on the Tour de France. It's not a certainty, but it's a strong possibility.
Daryl Impey's getting back on Navarro. This is a phenomenal ride from him. 53 seconds they have now. Navarro is chasing 53 seconds Steve Cummings, so in theory that's plenty of time for Steve to take it to the finish safely without taking any risks.
I think Navarro's weakening here as well, otherwise Impey, good though he is, would not be able to get back on the wheel of Dani Navarro. So that was a huge acceleration that dropped Vincenzo Nibali, and he might be beginning to pay for it. Still got a few hundred metres to go to the summit, and he's found Daryl Impey sweeping past him now. So Impey takes over second place on the road, and Navarro actually has a battle on his hands to stay in contact with the South African. And now there's a big attack, and it comes from Julian Alaphilippe from Ethics Quickstep in the white jersey. He's decided that it's game time for him. Alaphilippe started the day in second place in the general classification, a few seconds ahead of Chris Froome, and he is a GC player, maybe not for Paris, but certainly for now. So watch that move from Julian Alaphilippe in the white jersey. Meanwhile, Daryl Impey and Dani Navarro have the chase of their life if they want to get across to Steve Cummings, who is closing in on another victory. Here they go, Impey, Navarro, a glance over their shoulder to see where Vincenzo Nibali is, and the answer to that question is probably nowhere. Simon Geschke, who is part of that move, he comes backwards, and so too does Paul Voss, swept up by the Sky train as Sky move to the front. Is that ominous for the rest? That's Jan Bakelants, who was part of the group as well, up the road, going backwards. But the first attack from one of the big GC players further down the road as Nibali goes over the top in fourth place on the road and going backwards. The first big attack has come from the white jersey of Julian Alaphilippe, who now gets across to Alexis Villamoz from Étoile Mondiale. Domenico Pozzovivo, my mistake. So Pozzovivo and Julian Alaphilippe. Well, Alaphilippe is riding for himself. Pozzovivo is expecting not Alaphilippe, but another Frenchman, Romain Bardet, to get onto his wheel pretty soon when he attacks. Will it come from Bardet? Has he got it in his legs? What Steve Cummings got left? Downhill pretty much all the way. It flattens out in the closing kilometre or so. But, well, I think Cummings can start thinking about his victory celebration. I think we're pretty much certain of that.
I doubt he'll have ever enjoyed a descent as much as he's enjoying this one right now, because if you told him this morning that he was going to get whistled through all those riders and end up in that position, I think he might have found it quite hard to believe. But he's pulled off on the first stage, whereas a proper breakaway chance, which would have been one of his first targets, he's just gone and nailed it.
Panache pretty much wherever you look on the mountain today. What about this man, the Maillot Jaune, Greg Van Avermaet for Belgium, for BMC. Took the jersey in great style with a stage victory. And now, holding on to it, he's decided to have a go at extending his lead. Who would have predicted that? Meanwhile, further down the road, 4 minutes further down the road from Steve Cummings, this is the developing story. Pozzovivo had gone off the front, and now he's being reeled back. Team Sky is setting a furious pace. Wout Poels doing the donkey work for Chris Froome and keeping the pace so high that no one dares or can attack off the front of it. And Alaphilippe has been reined back in and swept past now.
For sure that has been doing this. You can see they've really wound up the pace Team Sky. They've brought back Julian Alaphilippe so easily. And that'll be Magnus Barguil, who's being distanced as well. So for Alaphilippe, that's a good move regards the white jersey competition.
Frustrating day for France today. They might have won in the football last night, but this is not going their way today. Because there's an attack from Dan Martin, Ethics Quickstep. So the man Adam Yates and Martin, the next two riders to go. And this is an attack that really might well stick as they go through 1 kilometre to go until the summit of the Col d'Aspin. So he's got a few hundred metres to extend his advantage and take a lead over the other big GC players down onto the descent and towards the finish line.
So Team Sky, I'm pretty sure what they were doing there was just winding up really high to make sure they could have Chris Froome in a prime position over the top. So because the gaps could open up in this descent in a bigger group if somebody makes a slight accident. So Team Sky are just riding a strong defensive game there.
Meanwhile, Cummings, just one moment, one lapse of concentration, one misread corner, and everything could crumble before him here, but he's so experienced. He's a great bike handler as well as being tactically brilliant and physically as strong as an ox. Seems unlikely that that would happen. Perfect conditions, no dampness on the road. Rain, thunderstorms indeed were threatened today, but look at the glorious sunshine and extreme heat of the Pyrenees today. Navarro and Impey further down the road won't be able to get across to Steve Cummings. Of that, there is little doubt. They'll try, but he's gone, hasn't he? No sign whatsoever as they look forward of Steve Cummings. He's entering the barriered section now, which is always an indication that he's not far from the finish. Just 2K remain for Steve Cummings, and he's going to be greeted by a wall of noise as he rides towards another stage victory on another World Tour stage race. Happens to be the Tour de France, though, and there's no bigger race on the calendar than this. He won a stage last year, and he's at it again this year. A remarkable ride.
Supposed to take the final left-hander. There's a little false flat, very narrow road up to the finish, the last K, which isn't pan flat. It's going to be a little bit uphill, but I think now he's going to be just floats over that, I'm sure of it. The adrenaline's going to be pumping, and this is going to be just such a wonderful day for him for many reasons.
What about his team? What about his team? This will be their 4th stage victory, Team Dimension Data. Newly in the World Tour. They didn't exist a couple of years ago, and they've come into existence. They've signed some star riders. There's some star riders with all sorts of different capabilities and capacities. In Mark Cavendish, they have a rejuvenated champion back to his brilliant best. And in this man, they have, well, I hesitate to call him a joker in the pack, but in some ways, that's just exactly what he is.
Yeah, he's almost a wild card, really. I mean, we always notice him sitting last man in the peloton doing his own thing. But then he's allowed to do that because when it comes to the days that he targets, he tends to fulfill his objective. And there are very few riders in the professional peloton capable of doing that. And he's proving now that he's one of the best in the world at it. Every World Tour racer is shaking his head.
He knows his one. He knows his one, and he was in a state of shock when he won last year up to Mende in 2015. He couldn't believe what had happened to him. For a man who keeps his feelings quite often quite closed, he's a quiet character, quite shy. It all came flooding out when he crossed the finishing line, having outfoxed Bardet and Pinot on that occasion quite brilliantly, taking advantage of their slight hesitation. This time, though, he attacked much, much further out, soloed up the Col d'Aspin in absolutely brilliant circumstances. He has won stages in every World Tour stage. I know I've said it before, but I'll say it again. He's won stages in every World Tour stage race he has entered this year. The Tour of the Basque Country, where he attacked in the final kilometre. Then at Tirreno Adriatico, where he bridged across to a clutch of riders who were up the road. He sat on them and attacked with 2 or 3 kilometres to go. Then a huge attack, much, much further out on the Dauphiné. And now here on the Tour de France as he shakes his head and wonders what has befallen him and where this brilliant form and this Indian summer in this man's career has come from. He wins in even greater style, greater even than his win in 2015. Steve Cummings, enjoy this moment. You'll remember it for the rest of your life. This is a high mountain stage in the Pyrenees, and you have ridden better than Vincenzo Nibali. You've dispatched the former Tour de France winner, and you have outfoxed the entire race. 29 men went up the road when the breakaway went today, and 1 beat them all, and that man is Steve Cummings. The battle for second place is a squabble for minor placings, really, between Danny Navarro and a brilliant ride from Daryl Impey. He's dropped Vincenzo Nibali, so too has Navarro. A consolation prize for these two. Impey's enjoying the moment, Navarro perhaps less so. They've buried themselves to put themselves in this position. An honourable result indeed, and this will look good on both their Palmares at the end of their careers. It's not what they would have wanted necessarily, but they'll take second and third on a mountain stage in the Pyrenees all day long.
Very few riders ever in their career get to ride at the front of the Tour de France on a mountain stage, so Daryl Impey would have never thought he'd have had that experience. So I'm sure today, even though he's racing for a second or third place, it's going to be a magic day that he'll never forget.
Well, the bookmakers would still say probably that Chris Froome is the favourite to win the Tour de France for Great Britain and for Team Sky. But what about British success once again, David Miller, on this race? As we watch the battle for second being won by Daryl Impey from South Africa with the Spaniard Danny Navarro crossing in third place. What about British success on this race? It is exceptional. A 4th stage win, and we're only on stage 7 of the Tour de France.
It really is amazing. Success breeds success, and they've all come from one team so far, but Mark Cavendish has often had that effect on teams. When he's going well, the whole team lifts its game.
Well, the sign of a great champion is that you don't stop, you don't give up, and Vincenzo Nibali cannot be accused of that today. He lost time in the Massif Central, perhaps deliberately, perhaps to engineer a situation in which he would be allowed by the general classification riders the freedom to do just what he did today, get up the road and ride for himself to a stage win. But 4th place is all that Vincenzo Nibali is going to take away from stage 7 of the Tour de France this year. He might go again, plenty more opportunities for Nibali to do what he does, but just signs of weakness today from Nibali. Having said that, you never write this man off, and his season might still well end with Olympic gold in Rio. Don't rule that out. But I can tell you this, David, the debates within the cycling community back in Great Britain as Nibali crosses in 4th place will rage now vis-a-vis Steve Cummings. What has happened here? Well, look, the inflatable arch with denoting 1 kilometre to go has collapsed on the Tour de France, on the group of favourites. I hope no one's been hurt in that. It seems
like
rather
somebody who had been hit by it,
comic than anything else. But, well, we'll deal with that in a second. I've never seen that again before on the Tour de France. I've seen a bus crash into the finish line, but I've never seen the inflatable arch of the Flamme Rouge fall on the Tour de France before. Never mind that. Let's concentrate on Greg van Avermaet for a second. And a brilliant ride from the yellow jersey. I can't remember nobody I've spoken to today can ever remember seeing the yellow jersey of the Tour de France in a breakaway this early on in the Tour de France, or indeed at all. Avermaet has done just that, held on and beaten some serious opposition, and he has taken time on almost everyone bar 4 riders in the general classification today, and will extend his lead in that competition. A remarkable ride from a remarkable rider. I'm just looking for all the big favourites now, and I don't think any of them have been affected by the collapsed arch. Certainly Chris Froome has ridden to the front, and he's actually indicated just stop. Alejandro Valverde is there now, and they're talking about what's occurred behind them, because there will not be a 3-kilometre rule today, because it's a mountain stage. And so if time gaps if people have been hampered, and I can't see sign, for example, of Nairo Quintana in that group.
He is on the right.
Oh, he's on the right.
Yeah.
Alberto Contador may not be there. Romain Bardet is there.
Contador's
So this just wants to be neutralised. OK, Contador's there. So Dan Martin is there.
Alaphilippe's
Everyone's there, but that's a smallish group is just coming over the finishing line together. Fabio Aru?
No, for sure the commissaires will just neutralise, make sure whoever's in that group.
So no battle. After all that, no battle. Chris Froome deep in conversation with Alejandro Valverde in who knows what language. I'm not sure Froome speaks any Spanish, and maybe it's French they're talking to each other in. But yeah, that's an interesting discussion there as they roll over. There's Quintana. Some people expected a move from him. Geraint Thomas still unpicking the collapsed arch and everything that unfolded today. So happiness breaks out across the group of favourites.
So the commissaires on Race Radio just announced they've taken a time at 3Ks. So anybody who was affected by that will actually be that group, whoever was in the group at 3 kilometres to go will get the same time at the finish.
Bizarre. There we go. Oh, so it happened before they came through. And one rider did appear to have been brought down.
So Adam Yates.
Adam Yates. So he was he'd attacked and had gone off the front.
There's his bike his bike is on the
on
the arch.
Bitter. That is bitter for Adam Yates, because he clearly was at the front. We saw him attacking in the company of Dan Martin, and he was brought down by that kilometre kite collapsing. So that's a disaster for Adam Yates if that's what's happened. We can only read into the aftermath of what we saw there. So misfortune for one British rider, Adam Yates, but well, what about this man? The heat haze, the background to a blistering ride from Steve Cummings as he takes win number 5 on this fantastic, marvellous career of his. Sorry, win number 4, let me correct myself there, in this season. Paul Voss and Simon Geschke were in the 29-man move that got up the road. They come over the line. Rafa Majka, another day where he loses time in the general classification. As well as Mikel Landa, who will have done a lot of work for Chris Froome today, and surely the pace that Team Sky was setting towards the top of the Col d'Aspin deterred the likes of Quintana from having an opportunistic attack today, even though some might have suspected it.
What's incredible about Steve Cummings' 4 wins this year is that they are all breakaway wins, and contrary to a pure climber or a time trialist or a sprinter where they get their chances often, for Steve Cummings it was very much he has to make those opportunities, and there's very few who can do that.
Well, we've just about had it all. Another British stage win and a collapsed arch. Pick the bones out of that, Gary.
Well, we'll get onto the fallen arches later. The most excited I've ever seen this man at a bike race. We'll give him a commercial break to compose himself. Likewise for the excited Matt Rendle and the excited, although I'm sure understated as ever, Steve Cummings there sharing a handshake. We will hear from him after this break. Two years running for Steve Cummings, 4 stages out of 7, astonishingly, for Dimension Data. And I think that, no disrespect to Mark Cavendish, might have been the best of them. And Doug Ryder got well hugged. Everybody on the team got hugged by Steve Cummings. Everybody got a good dose of the sweat that he'd been working up over that long, brilliant solo ride, and there is confirmation of it. He had a comfortable 1 minute and 5 seconds in the end over Daryl Impey and Danny Navarro. Vincenzo Nibali, who looked like he might be going forward for the stage win himself, was at 2:14 in the end. Greg Van Avermaet, what a sensational ride by him, building up an extra lead over the one he had already so that he had time in the bag to lose. Then it was Luis Angel Mate, Geraint Thomas 7th, Wout Poels, Gorka Izagirre and Alejandro Valverde 10th. Those all in the main field. OK, first order of business, let's hear from the man of the moment and the stage, Steve Cummings. He's with Matt Rendle.
Steve, 4 stage wins for the team, 4 stage wins for the country, and that was something very, very special indeed today. How do you feel now after bringing it home?
I feel pretty exhausted. It was a hard one. I need to recover now because we've got 2 hard days, but no, I'm obviously ecstatic with the team. It's been fantastic. Mark, it's great to be with Mark, you know, such a legend, and today was a brilliant day. It was a bit hot in the final, cooking up a bit, but managed to. I just gave everything to the top of the Aspan, and knowing that really the race had finished by the time we got there.
And you broke across on your own to the group of leaders, and then you went straight to the front and burned them off your wheel. Where did all that come from? Is it partly the Cavendish factor really giving you self-belief and belief in what can be done at this tour?
Yeah, I mean, success breeds success, and with Cavs a winner, you know, just a really good atmosphere in the team. It's great being around Bernie Eisel, Renshaw, for all the boys, the Etrians, Edvold, they're all winners, and we want to win. And the other day, you know, I thought Serge was going to win and take the yellow, but he had a bit of bad luck. But I think any person in our team is capable of winning a stage, and that's what we came for, with that clear objective of winning stages. So we've had a good start so far. It's only the first week, so.
Steve, and can I ask you, I mean, wouldn't anyone want you in their Olympic team for Rio after what you've done today and after all you've done this year?
I don't know. I don't know, if I was the coach I would, but you know, it's not. I'm not the selector. They've obviously got the experts there that know what they're doing, so let them get on with it.
Steve, well done, mate. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, I think there was a lot hidden in that understatement there, Chris.
Well, he knows it's out of his hands. What can he do? I think it's a very difficult position for them. I don't know what the criteria is now, whether they've got any wiggle room. But to be honest, if you could do a bit of a U-turn, I think it would be embarrassing not to. I mean, Steve...
You'd take him?
Oh, I'd take him like a shot, probably before this race. But he's just rode away from some of the best climbers in the world. He didn't survive. He rode away from them. And the Olympics is a mountainous course. You know, that is an incredible talent to leave at home for some very, very good riders, but domestic riders, and in Ian Stannard, a flat rider.
Yeah, no, and quite apart from making his case for the Olympics, which it it does resoundingly. An astonishing achievement for the second year running, and he did it differently. Last year he swooped past 2 breakaway riders on the run-in and surprised them. This time he went from a massive way out, like he did in the Dauphiné.
What we saw him do last year was develop self-belief. He realised that he could do it. It was a surprise to everybody, probably a surprise to him. Had another go, realised, you know what, I can actually do this. And he's still, despite being well into a career, finding out what he's capable of. And I think he went up to another level today.
Yeah. Now, as anyone who has ever ordered a bouncy castle for a public event will know, having inflatables is a dangerous business. And this is what happened on the run-in. Now, we laugh about it, but there's poor Adam Yates, who'd attacked off the front of the bunch. He's obviously been brought off his bike. His bike's still underneath it.
Yeah, his bike manages to not get scratched, but he actually landed on the tarmac, the poor lad. And now, I don't think we've ever seen anything like this. And they've just got to work out what to do with it. I mean, it's fortunate that the organisers didn't just stick rigidly to the rules and have said, you know, it was beyond the rider's control, we'll take the times at 3K, which is perfectly reasonable. But poor Yates there, he really did take a tumble, got some cuts on his face, so we'll find out a little bit more about him.
Yeah, and I mean, very frustrating for him. We didn't see in all the cutting about with the various people finishing at various points. We saw him and Dan Martin attack over the top, and we weren't sure how many seconds they might have gained, but it looks as though they might have nicked a few.
Well, if they take it at 3K, you'll get the majority, because it's so fast, that section, that what they are at 3K will have been what they were at that point. So if they install everybody as is at 3K, he'd have kept what he worked for.
OK, well, we'll keep an eye on the race computer and see if we get an updated stage result and general classification. In the meantime, we'll take another break. So many impressive things about Steve Cummings' ride today. One of them being his wingspan. Look at that celebration in the home straight. Arms wide as he takes his second stage win in as many years in the Tour. However, that was balanced, or not quite balanced, but nonetheless, there was a negative side to today's stage, and there is Adam Yates being pushed home by a teammate with a cut on his chin after being brought down, astonishingly, by the 1 kilometre to go banner. Now, we are being told that the race behind Steve Cummings is being neutralised at the 3 kilometre banner, so Adam Yates should get his advantage over the field. Whatever it was at 3 kilometres, he won't suffer from having been brought down at 1 kilometre. That's what we're told. We will bring you any updates on that as we get them. In the meantime, let's get over to the presentations, and for the 4th time in 7 stages, a Dimension Data rider is going up to get the stage winner's bouquet.
There are 2 places in France that Steve Cummings will remember for the rest of his life. One is Mende in the Massif Central, and the other is Lac de Payolle. Close to the Col d'Aspin, where Steve Cummings has just thrown down the ride of his life. In his own words, the best ever. An extraordinary combination of racecraft and ability. Controlled, never in doubt, perfectly executed. Trademark Cummings, David.
Yeah, it is. It's the new Cummings. It's he's taken this style of riding and he's owning it himself now. Nobody's doing what he's doing. There are riders who are specialists in breakaways, but nobody's doing it quite like Steve Cummings is at the moment. It really is. Each one's slightly different, and you can see he reads the race perfectly.
Brilliant ride from Daryl Impey to finish in 2nd place in the company of Danny Navarro, just out of the top 3, Vincenzo Nibali. That's the calibre of rider who Impey, and most importantly, of course, Steve Cummings have got the better of. Vincenzo Nibali not able to live with Cummings on this occasion, and the clamour for those 2 men to do battle at the Rio Olympic Games has just gone up a few decibels. Greg Van Avermaet will be in Rio, riding for Belgium. And what a way to prepare for that. A fantastic day out for the yellow jersey. Van Avermaet pulling a surprise move on just about everyone in the race and getting himself another cheeky minute and a half or so in the general classification. I say cheeky, it was emphatic in the end. A brilliant ride from Van Avermaet, who held on for as long as he could on the Col d'Aspin and did it to great effect. His margin grows.
It does grow, astonishingly. His lead now up to 6 minutes 36 over Julian Alaphilippe. So his tactic of going out early to build up an extra cushion which he could then lose has really worked for him. Alejandro Valverde is at 6:38, Joaquim Rodriguez at 6:39. Chris Froome leads the group of riders on 6:42. Now we are waiting an update on that, GC, because if we look at the pictures of the collapsing kite, Chris, if Adam Yates is going to be given any gap that he had over the field, he should be in front of Chris Froome. He should be up into 5th place.
Yeah, at the moment everybody's just been, well, it has been neutralised in the true sense. Everybody's been given the same time, which would be insult to injury, literally in this case, because for all his troubles there, if he didn't grasp a few seconds as well, that would be a real shame. So hopefully that'll get corrected. I don't know whether they have the facility at 3K not to just check who the riders are, but to record all the small time gaps. So we'll have to wait to see.
Because you can see there, he's definitely ahead of the field. It's not as though, because we only saw him and Dan Martin attack over the top, we didn't see them again until this point, but he clearly had a timeable gap.
Well, he's ahead of the field by the fact he's on the other side of the collapse there. Yeah, and the others are just coming to a stop now. And he must have just hit it just as it was going down. I mean, that must have happened so quickly if you consider that the front runners didn't have any problems at all. So, and it was a straight line as well, so it must have come down literally when he got there, because you can see you could see the structure well in advance. Yeah. So good, we're hearing now this blue over it. So if the generator went down, it just started to collapse when he was there. Yeah. He was just unlucky.
Okay, act of God. Now then, Greg Van Avermaet, fantastic tactics today. Very rare that you see the yellow jersey get into a break, and what a break it was.
Well, one of the things he is a brilliant tactician, and that was really playing to your strengths and going on the offensive when everybody thought he'd be defending. So could he hang on to the jersey and to actually extending his lead? It was remarkable, and he knew exactly what he had to do, climbed well, and yeah, just got in the right move of the day.
Absolutely. 6 minutes 38 is lead now, Greg Van Avermaet. Let's hear from him.
Maybe not this way. Was it planned this morning in briefing?
No, it was not the plan. It was just the feeling. I think it's important as a cyclist, you just go by your feeling. And we tried to control the race with the team, but they kept on attacking. And at one point, it was just too much we were riding. And they attacked, so I saw the point to go by myself, and I think it was a smart move, first of all, to take some advantage before the climb, and then I could keep it, and in the end of the day, I took some extra time, so it's been a beautiful day, and one day extra in yellow for me, it's really nice.
Yeah, looking at the shape you're in, you could even be optimistic for another one, maybe, no?
I think tomorrow is above my profile, and today one climb I can survive, and I can do a good climb. But when the really guys go for GC, it's done. And I think it was just important in my head keep it another day. And for tomorrow on, I try to save myself a little bit more and try to go for another stage win maybe in the 3rd week.
Talking about stage wins, Cummings took off in an amazing style. There was nothing to be done against Cummings today.
No, he's an amazing guy. I was with him in the team, and once he goes like this, you know it's over. And I know I was not riding for the stage win, and I'm really happy for Stevie because he's a great rider. And if you see how solo he can go, how strong he is, it's a really big performance of him.
Thank you very much.
Now, quick look ahead to the stage Greg Van Avermaet was talking about. Pau figures tomorrow, and it's set out for another hard day in the Pyrenees. Biggest mountain of the day and the first super category climb of the race is the 2,115-metre Col du Tourmalet. With the second and 2 first cat climbs to follow, there are 50 mountain points on offer. For the second day running, though, the final climb isn't the stage finish. From the top of the Col de Peyresourde, there's a downhill run to the line in Bagnères de Luchon. 2 o'clock tomorrow for live coverage of stage 8, 7 o'clock for highlights. And I tell you what, there'll be plenty of highlights to squeeze into the show at 7 o'clock tonight. And we hope to hear from Adam Yates, who's having stitches. But a quick word about tomorrow. He's right, he's not going to hang on, is he, Greg Van Avermaet, tomorrow?
No, I think he's done everything that he can. It's in the lap of the gods now. He's got quite a buffer, though. He might be able to fight his way through. Depends on how it goes. But I think the writing's on the wall.
Yeah. It'll be the favourites tomorrow when we head into the deep Pyrenees, but it was Steve Cummings today, and we will hear more from him and from Adam Yates when we see you back here at 7 o'clock for the highlights.